When this orphan boy from the streets gets picked up by a noble family filled with magic geniuses, the butler makes it clear that he's nobody, and his magic doesn't even come close to the boys of their family. To prove it, the butler takes him to the training grounds and tells him he can already feel the immense power of their aura. Aster takes one look at them and simply says, "Their level is too low. Yeah, our boy isn't exactly good at making friends." One of the noble boys immediately raises his hand and challenges him to a duel, convinced this lucky street rat needs to be taught a lesson. Aster agrees, but there's one condition: he gets to choose his opponent. So he points at the boy who challenged him, and then 4 more. Everyone freezes when Aster announces he's fighting all 5 of them at once. The butler can barely hide his laughter, already expecting an easy beating. One street orphan against 5 of the family's best young nobles, all of whom have spent their entire lives studying magic. But the second the fight begins, Aster completely destroys them. A barrage of magic bullets sends 4 of them crashing to the ground almost instantly. They're completely stunned. Not only can this guy use magic bullets, but he's firing them at a level they can't even react to. Then he closes the distance and starts beating them with his fists. The nobles can't even process what's happening. They protest that this isn't even magic. Aster doesn't care. He simply tells them, the outside world is overwhelming and cruel. And then he keeps beating them. Nobody can believe what they're seeing. They're not even wondering how Aster won anymore. They're wondering where this street orphan learned to beat people like that. But this is only the beginning. When Aster finally enters the Magic Academy, every student has their mana purity and total mana volume measured. Average students score around 4 in mana purity and 17 in mana volume. The top noble prodigy, however, gets a purity of 9 and a volume of 67. Everyone is shocked, and the professor is convinced nobody here can beat him. Then Aster walks up. The moment he touches the crystal, it instantly displays an error. His mana purity and volume are so high that the crystal can't even measure them. Everyone is completely stunned. Even the professor assumes the crystal must be broken. So, who exactly is this orphan boy, and why is he so ridiculously powerful? Aster, known as Number 1, was the lethal hunting dog for the prestigious House Declan. He is a mage raised from the slums of the Grey Zone to do the family's dirty work. But after a decade of servitude, the sight of a wyvern soaring freely through the sky sparked a desire for freedom, a desire to roam this world, just like a carefree wyvern. Attempting to retire, Aster secured a legendary magic tome to bargain for his freedom, only to be intercepted by the one man he could not defeat, Farron von Declan, the head of the family and the strongest mage on the eastern continent. The power gap was absolute. Farron easily dismantled Aster's defenses and offered him a choice: return to the family as a high-ranking vassal or die. But Aster knew that a golden leash was still a leash. In a final act of spite, he refused to hand over the tome. Instead, he incinerated the priceless artifact with purple flames, choosing destruction over submission. Enraged, Farron retaliated with the Declan family's legendary blue flame, burning Aster alive. As he was getting burned, Aster refused to beg for mercy, and vowed that if he ever lived again, he would take true freedom and revenge. And just as he says this, the blue fire surrounding him extinguishes, and that legendary tome he had burned appeared back right in his hands. A complex magic circle forms on his chest that would carry him not into the afterlife, but back to the beginning. Aster opens his eyes to find himself begging in the streets. He has no clue what is happening since he was just burning to death moments ago. Soon after, he realizes that he has gone back to the past. The surroundings are strikingly familiar, and it finally comes to him that this is the Grey Zone, the place where our boy used to beg each day before he became a troubleshooter. He remains in disbelief that he has returned to his youth. Looking into the sewer water, he sees his reflection and notices that he is young again. The only part he hates is the fire mark on his chest. Even though he has come back in time, this mark stayed with him. Our protagonist is not aware of exactly what happened, but he is sure that the magic tome definitely caused this. He feels conflicted, wondering if the tome was ever even capable of such a feat. Then again, the fact that the lazy Declan family head came personally to retrieve it shows how important the artifact is, despite how little information is known about it. He brushes the confusion aside, finding the situation to be a good thing. The experience is too vivid to be a dream, and the stench of sewage from Seal's lecture hall is way too real, confirming that our hero is alive with a strong and mighty morning. He finds himself in a situation where anything he does could succeed, leading him to question what it really means to achieve success. He and his comrades had a dream, and it was the primary reason he decided to retire in his previous life. In his flashback, he sits as his fellow reminds him that they were born as vagrants in the Grey Zone. They had nothing, could not dress well, could not eat, and could not get an education. The guy then asks which of these Aster thinks was the most painful. Our boy answers that it was not eating, but his comrade believes that if it had just been hunger, they would not have ended up in their current state. He asks what our protagonist thinks dragged their lives into the sewer. Aster finally answers that it was because they were not educated. Hearing the reply, his comrade states that if they had studied, they would not be living as slaves to the noble people. He declares that if he ever retires, he will build a library. Back in the present, the dream of our hero is exactly that. building a library where anyone, regardless of money, status, or gender, can freely read books. He wants to take it one step further and build a tower. Although there is no specific reason, he simply likes tall things, and the location does not matter either. He intends to put every kind of book there, but there is one that absolutely must be included. Our protagonist will place the Declan family's secret manual right at the entrance on the first floor, so even the vagrants from the gray zone, illegitimate noble children, or a butcher's son could carry a copy. The cover will bear the Declan crest, and inside will be the secret techniques they treasure more than life. Just imagining it makes our boy's mouth water. The only problem is how he will get his hands on the manual, but he brushes it aside as a future problem. He believes if he spreads the manual everywhere, everyone will love it. Just then, a guy shows up and kicks him hard, beating him for hiding out while he was supposed to be keeping his seat. Struck and confused, Aster wonders about the man. He reminds himself that he has survived countless battles, including everything but aerial warfare. As a veteran troubleshooter, our hero blocks the guy's kick and declares that since he has been hit 7 times, he will give 70 in return. As soon as he lands a punch, he wonders why his hand is glowing. A silver-haired guy hits back, cursing Aster for hitting his big brother and begins beating him even more. Getting beaten up, our boy cries from the pain, noting that emotional pain lasts longer. Just then, the newcomer loses his balance and falls into the sewage. Aster takes the chance and runs while the guy shouts at him. His plan is not to run away forever, but to remember the guy's face to take revenge later. The hits he took, he will wear on his chest like medals. Aster is a veteran, a man who does not know the word quit. Soon after, sitting in the street, he finds that his wrist is sprained from punching. Realization hits that his body is currently too weak. This makes him forget about the dream of the tower for now, as he decides to focus on fixing his physical condition first. Just then, a kid shows up and asks if Aster is hungry. When asked if the kid knows him, the boy refuses to answer. Our boy notes that the kid is a mess, but his clothes look expensive, meaning he is probably a noble's child who is struggling for power after a fall. In other words, he is a living catastrophe. Interrupting these thoughts, the kid introduces himself as Damien and mentions his mother, Bianca. Aster feels frustrated, but when the kid mentions he does not have a mother, Aster calms down. He says he does not have a father, so he wins the exchange and demands Damien go his own way. Quietly, Aster decides not to get involved with the kid, planning to ditch him before things get worse. Still, Damien does not move. When Aster tells him to leave, the boy reveals he will go with him. These words make Aster frustrated and ready to smack him. But before anything can happen, Damien reaches forward and starts healing him with a magic touch. Aster knows that it is not just a magic touch, it is the light of healing, a secret technique of the Blander family, which fell because of Declan. With that, our protagonist realizes he has gotten involved in something dirty and dangerous. He wonders why a Blander child is in the gray zone, since at this current time, the Blanders should still be strong. When Aster calls out for Damien, the kid's hair falls aside, revealing 2 colored eyes. The realization hits our hero as he remembers a member of the Blander bloodline with odd eyes known as the Monster of Blander, the madman who would not die even if someone kills him, Damien von Blander. Meanwhile, Damien starts counting ants while Aster watches him with an annoyed face. Back when Aster was a troubleshooter, the Declan family sent him to the Blander estate. He traveled there with his comrade, questioning why a family as prestigious as the Blanders would call in outside help instead of handling their own affairs. His companion remarked that people of their status would never understand the machinations of the higher-ups. Another team member mentioned rumors regarding a monster at the Soft estate, claiming many had died there. While our boy expected to find a creature like an ogre, the reality proved far different. Instead of a beast, he found a human tearing others apart, casting unique healing magic while laughing in a state of pure madness. That was the Monster of Blander, the mad butcher who remained impossible to kill, Damien von Blander. Back in the present, Aster still cannot figure out why the only son of the Blander head is in such a shabby place. Damien interrupts his thoughts to ask for food, inviting Aster to join him. The boy mentions his mother always taught him to eat well to stay healthy and suggests that Aster is only sick because he does not eat. Our hero stands up, agreeing with the logic, and asks if the child has any money. When Damien pulls out a bag stuffed with coins, Aster is instantly convinced they should be friends. While Damien finds the sudden shift surprising, Aster declares their friendship official, stating that friends must share what they have before shouting that it is time to eat. After the meal, Aster lies on his bed feeling refreshed from washing up, while Damien looks around in confusion. When questioned, Damien admits he never knew houses existed above the places where people eat. Since he always slept outside, this is a new realization for him. Aster reacts awkwardly as Damien climbs onto the bed, mentioning that he also lacks a father. Aster claims he actually has one, but Damien refuses to believe it, turning the conversation into a competition. When Aster brings up his mother, Damien glances around and notes she is not present. This makes our boy realize that to Damien, if someone is not visible, they simply do not exist. Deciding to investigate further, he asks how long the boy has been alone. Damien explains that since running away from his family, he has slept 10 times. Aster wonders if the child is being pursued, noting that he measures time by his sleep cycles. Damien clarifies that he sleeps twice a day, meaning 10 sleeps equate to only 3 or 4 days. However, he adds that he has not slept properly since arriving because the ground is too uncomfortable. Our hero buries his face in his pillow, confirming that a madman like Damien is fundamentally different from others. Still, if the kid is stuck in the gray zone, Aster can act as his nanny. He no longer minds forming a connection to the Blander family. As Damien lies on the bed still complaining of discomfort, Aster considers how useful this relationship could be when he eventually faces off against Declan, especially given that family's vast collection of books. Before that, however, he plans to take revenge on the man who beat him earlier. He tells Damien not to disturb him while he lies down, which the boy interprets as a breathing practice. Aster nods, mentioning that Damien can join him once he is finished. In his previous life, Aster built his magical foundation on standard issue spells provided to troubleshooters, but the limits of such magic were obvious. To compensate, he had once infiltrated noble houses and stole spells, nearly dying several times in the process. He learned hardened body techniques, spirit magic, summoning, and alchemy. Right before his death, he encountered a truly catastrophic power, which is why the most important spell for him to learn now is the Declan Foundation Art, the Heavenly Origin Technique. This breathing technique is the source of all Declan spells and is capable of harnessing every attribute of mana. Having memorized it for research in his past life, our hero finally has the chance to use it. As he begins the practice, it feels as if lava is flowing through his veins. He struggles against the pain but forces himself to focus, knowing he must master this power. Suddenly, blue flames escape from his hands. These are impurities expelled by mana burn, a high-level technique used only by elite mages of noble bloodlines. This process, known as a mana shower, burns away the filth within his circuits. Aster sits up abruptly, drenched in sweat and breathless. While Damien is already fast asleep, Aster notes that most impurities have left his body. His mana is now purer than it ever was in his previous life. He knows that defeating Declan might seem impossible even if he were born 100 times, yet he is certain his chances have increased. He was a troubleshooter, and our boy is a man who never gives up, even when the odds are nearly zero. The next day, Aster hides Damien's distinctive hair with a platinum tint and changes his clothes to avoid the notice of the Blander family. While Damien admires his new look and asks what is next, Aster calmly informs him they are going to cause some chaos. Elsewhere, the man who beat our hero earlier wakes up and enjoys the weather until he spots Aster and Damien standing before him. He calls Aster the youngest, scolding him for running off. He mocks Aster's appearance, asking if he showered in a sewer, and points at Damien, labeling him a rich target. Before he can finish his taunt, our protagonist charges forward and punches him hard. Satisfied that his memory of the man's face is still fresh, Aster prepares to hit him 123 times. Just then, another boy shouts in confusion as a group arrives, recognizing Aster as the youngest member of their circle. Looking at the gathering crowd, Aster finds them all familiar and wonders just how far things will go today. Aster begins beating the boys one after another, handling them all alone while Damien stands by, admiring the way our protagonist utilizes mana. Watching the way Aster clenches his fists tightly, Damien observes as he strikes repeatedly, calling the display amazing. Just then, one boy falls in front of Damien. As the child bends down, preparing to heal him, Aster grabs the wounded youth and asks how many hits he has landed. He delivers another strike before the boy can answer, causing the guy to roar in agony. Soon after, the boys collapse on the ground. Aster continues hitting the one who beat him earlier, using a stick this time. When he asks how many times he himself was hit, the guy replies that he has forgotten. Hearing that, our hero calls for Damien, who steps forward and heals the beaten boy with his light. Aster stands behind Damien with an awkward smile, reminding the guy that he is from the box-shoulder generation. The defeated youth considers them both evil, admitting he can only count up to 2 digits anyway. Later that night, the boys stand in a line, repeating our boy's words. The scene fills Aster with pride as he senses the focused energy. He is proud of himself for completing over 100 hits per person, totaling over 1,000. It was a new challenge even for a seasoned troubleshooter like himself, who has experienced everything except mountain battles and aerial combat. When the silver-haired guy steps forward to ask if they can leave, Aster gives permission. However, the guy hesitates, pointing out that this place is actually his house. Our hero asks if he is being told to get lost. Hearing that, the group panics, insisting that isn't what they meant, and they back away quickly. As the group flees, Damien and Aster watch them silently. Suddenly, our protagonist senses someone approaching, fast but quiet, with a presence like a troubleshooter. He wonders if it is a pursuer, questioning how he was found since he has been so careful. He doubts the Blander family could have tracked him so quickly. Checking his mana, Aster realizes he has too little for even a single spell, and hand-to-hand combat would be risky. Another realization strikes. Even in his past life, our protagonist never had an abundance of magical power, often facing situations exactly like this. It is not unfamiliar. He gathers all the mana he has, compressing it repeatedly until the energy wraps around him, finally feeling satisfied with the amount. He stands ready as the figure appears. Instead of attacking, the person drops to his knees, addressing Damien as young master. Damien recognizes the man as Alfredo. The man rushes to Damien, crying and confessing he does not know how long he has been searching. He asks where Damien has been and admits he was so worried he could not sleep. Uncomfortable, Damien tries to push him away, but Alfredo refuses to let go, begging the boy to return to the family or kill him instead. Collecting himself, Alfredo lifts Damien carefully and introduces himself to Aster as the butler of the Blander family. Our hero responds without delay, introducing himself as well. After the introductions, Alfredo assumes Damien must really like Aster and invites our protagonist to come with them to the family estate. Our boy is puzzled, as prestigious families usually reject anything common or dirty. He cannot understand their intentions, but for him, forming a connection with the Blander family is already part of his plans. Conveniently, the Blander territory runs along the path to the city where Xenian Academy is located, home to the greatest library in the East. Aster silently declares that he will build the best library, so stopping by the estate is a good idea. He thanks Alfredo as the butler goes to bring a carriage. Our hero stands there, aware he has strayed slightly from his path, but he is fine with that. He puts his shirt back on and decides to go with them. Soon after, the carriage stops in front of the Blander mansion. Aster steps out, aware that it is his first time officially entering Blander territory. People stand at the entrance to welcome them. Alfredo asks them to rest since it is already late. A woman named Lanzi approaches Damien, who appears frightened. Later, Alfredo walks through the corridor and knocks on a door. Entering, he reports respectfully that he found Damien in the 7th block of the White Zone and has brought him back. The lady sitting inside sends out a sharp blast of magic, asking if Damien is hurt. Alfredo calls her matron, asking her to calm down. After hearing the full report, matron relaxes, relieved. Meanwhile, Alfredo thinks to himself that it is fortunate for her and for our hero, who might have otherwise been perceived as a threat to the young master. Matron was once called the Blood Witch. When it comes to her son, she loses control. She is relieved the situation ended with only a small burst of fury. Shrugging it off, Alfredo reports something unusual. When she asks what it is, Alfredo explains about Aster, the new friend Damien made. He describes how our boy sensed his presence before he even appeared and was already prepared for a counterattack. What makes him more suspicious is that Aster was holding a mana bullet in his hand. Matron finds it astonishing that a child from the Black and White Zone possesses such ability. Just then, Alfredo asks for a favor. The next morning, Alfredo stands in front of our hero, asking him to become the successor. Aster stares at him awkwardly. Alfredo assumes the boy must be surprised, believing no one from the Black and White Zone would refuse such an opportunity for wealth and honor. But Aster interrupts his thoughts by refusing the offer, leaving Alfredo shocked and puzzled. Alfredo stands stunned, and just then, Damien appears, questioning his friend about what his answer means. Our hero quickly covers Damien's mouth as he thanks Alfredo for offering him the position of butler's successor, but says he prefers things the way they are right now. He repeats that he genuinely appreciates the offer. Alfredo still cannot process the rejection, and a thought crosses his mind. Since Aster was born a vagrant in the gray zone with nothing and learned magic purely through natural talent, Alfredo assumes he must be full of himself. He understands the feeling, since he too was born into an ordinary family and once ran wild without knowing his own limits. Finally, Alfredo speaks, calling the words of Aster vast. Aster responds sharply, which only frustrates Alfredo, who asks if he thinks he can do anything and conquer the world. Our boy refuses the notion immediately, making Alfredo even more annoyed. However, he endures the response and, with a smile, asks if Aster has heard the saying about a goblin in the canyon. He explains that this is exactly where Aster is right now, still in the canyon, unaware of the dangers waiting beyond. Meanwhile, our hero thinks of himself more like a wyvern. His silence only pushes Alfredo's patience to its limit, and the butler shouts that Aster knows nothing, deciding he will personally show him just how vast and terrifying the world truly is. Soon after, Alfredo takes Aster into a room where countless students are practicing with wooden swords. Seeing Alfredo, they quickly line up and greet him as their master. Standing tall, Alfredo glances at Aster, asking what he thinks. All the students are around his age, but they are officially recognized talents of House Blander. The master is sure our protagonist can sense their power, but Aster does not react, although deep down, he knows House Blander is no joke. It is hard to believe they are still in their teens, so well trained, their subtle aura filling the entire space. However, looking into their eyes, our boy sees nothing more than a bunch of goblins. Finally, he speaks, saying that he can indeed feel something. Alfredo becomes excited, asking if Aster now accepts the proposal. He adds that if he succeeds him, he will shine brighter than anyone. Then Aster mentions he hates the light. Just then, one of the students, Winster, steps forward. He claims that if Aster truly felt something, there is no way he would have turned down the offer. He believes that rejecting it proves Aster hasn't truly felt their strength yet, and if the master allows, he would like to give Aster some experience. When the master asks if he wants a duel, the student clarifies that he just wants to let Aster taste magic. Although Alfredo finds it a bit cocky, he likes the idea and asks our hero to duel Winster. Aster does not react, though he is well aware that he is a thorn in those students' eyes. To them, he is just a lucky vagrant who rolled in from nowhere. Aster chooses his opponents himself, pointing straight at Winster. Then, he points at everyone one after another, declaring that he will take on all 5 at once. Everyone is confused, including Alfredo, but he soon laughs out loud, believing that this is exactly the spirit a successor should have. He asks if our boy can take responsibility for his words, since one could say he is insulting House Blander. Without hesitation, Aster takes full responsibility. Alfredo agrees, saying that if he lasts 1 minute, he will receive a gift, but if he doesn't, Alfredo will hold him responsible. These words are enough for our hero to understand that the butler is trying to rope him in, and that by responsibility, he probably means forced succession. Soon after, the match begins. A man standing behind Alfredo points out how dangerous this is, but according to the butler, the stubbornness of Aster needs to be broken for him to grow. The instructor worries that if the young master's guest gets injured, his own career will be over. He tries to explain the danger to Damien, requesting him to stop the butler. Damien beams, however, and Lancy reminds him that Lady Gamma will scold him if he gets involved. Damien is annoyed, while Alfredo calls out to start the match. With no choice, the instructor walks toward the arena. Meanwhile, Lancy instructs Damien not to do anything before she gets back, but Damien clearly has something on his mind. On the other hand, the instructor begins explaining that the rules will be turn-based, but Alfredo interrupts from behind, making it a free-for-all. The instructor sighs and states that the duel will continue until one side surrenders. Aster stands before the 5 students. Winster is frustrated, believing that both Damien and the butler master merely pity Aster. Silently, he declares that he will crush Aster and expose his true worth. As soon as the match begins, our boy takes down 4 of them with a single strike in no time. Winster ends up shaking, clutching his chest. Aster confidently prepares to give Winster experience himself as magical balls float around his hand. Witnessing them, Winster believes they are magic bullets but thinks they are merely basic mana control. He assumes the mana cost is too high for them to be useful in combat. Meanwhile, Aster advises them not to judge people so easily. He then throws the mana balls forward, striking all of them at once. He closes the distance and declares his final point. The world is vast and bitter. He punches Winster hard, sending him flying. As Aster plans to pass his experience into them, Winster screams that he didn't use magic. Our boy rushes forward again, replying that it was indeed magic. He kicks Winster in the face, naming it physical magic. Everyone remains in disbelief as Aster defeats the students single-handedly. Meanwhile, Alfredo wonders about the magic bullets. Judging by their power, he believes they must have been compressed at least 4 or 5 times. He ponders what might have happened if those attacks had hit him during their first meeting in the Gray Zone. He admits that Aster possesses truly impressive mana control, and finds himself curious about how our protagonist became so skilled at physical combat. While Damien rushes over to heal the fallen trainees, Lady Gamma appears alongside Lancy. Seeing them, the instructor feels a wave of relief, believing they are finally saved from the chaos. Lady Gamma questions the situation immediately. Alfredo confesses he only intended to conduct a simple test of the boy's abilities. Even after his explanation, Lady Gamma remains unsatisfied, noting that the way Aster was beating the trainees seemed far more aggressive than a mere test. She then notices Damien's involvement and calls out to him. She orders Alfredo to gather the trainees and have them withdraw, while Damien and our hero are told to return to their room. Instructor Runfit steps forward, explaining that he tried his best to stop the fight, but Lady Gamma fires him regardless of his excuses. Later that night, within the Blander family's residence, Alfredo stands before Lady Gamma. She tells him she understands his intentions, but makes it clear he went too far this time. Alfredo apologizes, admitting he lost his temper and stating he is ready to accept any punishment. She asks about the spar, specifically questioning whether Damien helped our protagonist in the fight. Alfredo denies it and mentions that Aster was incredibly skilled at hitting people. Lady Gamma falls silent for a moment, prompting Alfredo to apologize again. He then brings up the magic bullet, explaining that our hero used the technique during the sparring session as well. He elaborates that Aster compressed the mana at least 4 or 5 times to increase its power. This explanation leads Lady Gamma to conclude that Aster has excellent control over his energy. Although she did not witness it herself, she imagines it must have been a significant spectacle. Defeating 5 trainees alone with just 1 magic bullet is a feat even high-level mages struggle to achieve with pure mana. Brushing the matter aside, Lady Gamma asks about the successor proposal. Alfredo reports that Aster rejected the offer politely. The news causes Lady Gamma to rethink her evaluation of our boy, and she orders for him to be brought to her. Soon after, Aster arrives to find Lady Gamo and Damien already waiting. She invites him to sit, and he follows her lead. As he does, she presents him with a box, explaining that Alfredo promised a gift earlier. Our hero remembers the promise but did not expect to receive it so soon, let alone directly from the matron. She urges him to open it, and as he does, a light shines from within to reveal a high-grade item. Even in House Blander, only recruits joining the top 5 mage divisions receive such equipment. Aster suspects that if he accepts, there might be a hidden agenda involved. Even as a gesture of goodwill, a mid-grade gift would have sufficed. A high-grade item feels intentionally overwhelming. Interrupting his thoughts, Lady Gamo tells him to accept it without worry, as he helped her son in the gray zone, and this serves as an apology for the day's events. She assures him he does not need to join the Blander family just because he accepts the gift. After asking a few questions and receiving polite confirmation that there are no strings attached, our protagonist finally accepts the gift with thanks. As he admires the item, Lady Gamo continues with a new proposal. She will arrange his admission to the academy so he can attend alongside Damien. Our hero is briefly confused, so Lady Gamo explains that Damien was supposed to enroll last year but strongly opposed it, leading to a postponement. She did not expect her son to run away to avoid it. She is asking Aster to join because Damien clearly likes him and might actually stay if Aster is there. Whatever our boy thinks of the request, he is satisfied because the logic makes sense. If Lady Gamo tries to force Damien again, the boy might flee, and Aster is the only obvious way to change his mind. Besides, this is a valuable opportunity for Aster. He knows that academies are essential in a world where blood ties and connections dictate one's future. Gaining an academic tie would be a tremendous advantage. It sounds promising, yet it also feels a little like a leash being placed around his neck. Still, our boy simply says he will think about it, and Lady Gamo accepts this, asking him to provide an answer once he has decided. She then asks why he rejected Alfredo's proposal to become a successor. Aster just smiles, recalling how Alfredo kneeled when he first found Damien in the gray zone. He firmly states that his own knees are precious. Meanwhile, outside the door, Alfredo listens to the conversation and reacts sharply to those words. Soon after, our hero sits in his room, having absorbed only 10% of the top-grade product, yet his mana has already increased significantly. Perhaps because his physique is changing to that of a flameborn, he notices that the process lacks the typical loss of power and accumulation of impurities found in normal spirit absorption. This result is even more astonishing than our boy ever expected. Brushing this aside, he turns his thoughts toward the academy. He had been considering the move before, but his answer is now clear. If he enrolls, finding a sponsor will be much easier. There are obvious advantages, yet it still feels as if he might be walking straight into a trap. Even so, Aster decides to clear his head by going for a run around the estate. As he steps out of his room, a voice suddenly calls out. The stranger possesses platinum blonde hair. Since the direct line consists only of Damien, Aster deduces this must be a collateral relative. Glancing at him, Aster cannot help but feel that this entire family is troublesome. When the stranger asks if he is Aster, our protagonist flatly denies it. The guy reacts sharply, noting that the gray hair and the irritated look in Aster's eyes match the description perfectly. Our boy calmly responds that hair color can change depending on the light. Masking his expression with kind-looking eyes, he questions how the stranger could call his gaze irritating. The guy momentarily relents, admitting the eyes look kind, and turns to leave. Just then, Alfredo rushes toward our hero, desperate to clear up last night's misunderstanding. Still unable to sleep after his failure to explain, the butler is panicked and teary-eyed. Alfredo insists that even if Aster became a butler, he would not need to wear out his knees so much, labeling the previous rejection a complete misunderstanding. Hearing this conversation, the platinum-haired guy turns back. He loudly claims he was right the first time, calling Aster's eyes unpleasant and dead, rarely seen since the days of Corbin's dead eyes. Our hero finally admits his identity. The guy grows even more frustrated, furious that Aster lied while acting so pleasant. He looks ready to erupt, but after glancing at Alfredo, he decides to retreat for now. He declares that he will return to the mage hall later to fix our boy's attitude. As the relative departs, Alfredo checks to see if everything is all right. Aster assures him he is fine while thinking internally that the timing is perfect. He will deal with the guy later. He then asks Alfredo if he can meet Lady Gamo immediately. It is still early in the morning when our hero steps into Lady Gamo's room. She asks if he has made up his mind, and Aster calmly states his decision to enroll in the academy. Lady Gamo expresses surprise at how quickly he reached a conclusion, but declares they will begin preparations right away, telling him to make himself comfortable. Aster thanks her for the consideration. As he leaves, Alfredo steps in, excitedly informing Lady Gamo that Aster accepted. The butler is full of praise, but Lady Gamo gives him a strange look as he continues his rambling. Alfredo declares that while the family will cover the first semester, the tuition for the following semester will be nearly impossible for someone from the gray zone to manage. He imagines our hero will grow anxious to learn more, at which point Alfredo can swoop in with a sponsorship. Interrupting the fantasy, Lady Gamo tells Alfredo he is speaking too loudly, prompting an immediate apology. He mentions it is mealtime and heads to the kitchen. Lady Gamo understands Alfredo's joy. After being rejected so many times, he finally sees a chance. In that sense, the Academy proposal is a risky plan, though Alfredo's confidence likely stems from being tricked the same way by the previous head butler. Meanwhile, our hero stands in front of the mage hall, expecting to find the guy from earlier. He enters and is met by a cloaked figure who questions his visit. At that moment, Aster realizes he does not even know the stranger's name, so he attempts to describe him by his appearance. Recognizing the description, the cloaked figure allows our protagonist through, noting that he was expected. He guides Aster toward a door and warns him to mind his head as he opens it. Aster steps inside as papers swirl through smoky air. A man appears and introduces himself as Wenji von Blander. He recognizes our hero immediately and firmly asks if Aster is there to meet his little brother. Aster stands there in a state of confusion, realizing the awkward guy from before is Wenji's brother. If there is anything Aster has felt while infiltrating various magic academies during his time as a troubleshooter, it is that the mages who study magic possess the distinct characteristics of those mockingly called pen holders. First, there is the disheveled hair, a consequence of pulling it out so much that it eventually stops growing. If their stages are divided, the first is denial. They refuse to admit their hair is falling out and wear robes pulled low over their heads. Eventually, they give up and reveal the truth. Then comes the stage where they completely shave their heads. Finally, stage 4. They attempt the impossible, researching magic to make their hair grow once more. However, Wenji stands apart. He serves our boy tea and apologizes, saying he wondered if his younger brother acted poorly due to his age. He admits he assumed the young master's guest would not make such a rude mistake. Aster looks at him awkwardly, amazed that Wenji appears so youthful. He asks if Wenji works at the Magic Academy, and Wenji confirms he currently serves as the vice dean. The fact that Wenji holds such a position at a young age is remarkable. A prestigious house like Blander would not place a bloodline member there without necessary skill, which proves Wenji's capability. Interrupting these thoughts, Wenji admits that Aster is a bit different from typical wayward noble sons. Our hero laughs it off, silently thinking it would be easier if Wenji had stayed up all night and arrived looking haggard, but instead, he has such a kind smile. Another point is that Wenji seems to have great compatibility with him. Wenji then congratulates him for deciding to enroll in Xenian Academy. He finds it a great opportunity and believes our protagonist will learn a lot. Wenji also mentions that he graduated from the same academy in the 145th class. Our boy feels awkward that Wenji suddenly brings up their academic connection, and Wenji apologizes with a gentle smile, saying he is simply glad Aster is joining, and that is why he is talking so much. He then asks if they should get to the main point. Before Aster can say anything, Wenji states there is something he wants to confirm, questioning if our protagonist would risk his life for a friend. The question leaves Aster confused while Wenji brings out a book, stating that the matter concerns the reputation of the Blander family. He places the book on the table, declaring that if our boy could risk his life, he will receive it. Aster recognizes it immediately. The core secret of the Blander family, Healing Light, a secret treatise. Meanwhile, Lady Gamo tends the garden, thinking that since Damien's move to the academy is settled, a major issue has been handled smoothly. She feels at ease and silently praises our boy as a good friend with a remarkable nature. Although Alfredo may see him as rude and shameless at times, she believes that at this age, everyone is like that. What she likes most is that even after learning Damien's background, our protagonist does not flatter him. She admits that he is different, someone worthy to remain by Damien's side, but also a free bird who doesn't belong anywhere. Because of that, she must think of a way to keep him close, as she cannot lose such talent for Damien's sake. Back in the castle, Aster silently questions why Wenji is offering the Blander family's secret treatise. To him, it feels like a trap. However, he cannot even read Wenji's eyes because they are clear, bright, and yet emotionless. No matter what eyes someone has, traces of feeling always exist, but Wenji is like a perfect assassin whose emotions are sealed. He wears a mask so completely that even he himself may not know his true self. Breaking his thoughts, Wenji tells him to be careful and not answer rashly just because of the reward in front of him. Aster silently feels his unease disappear, replying calmly that he hates the pressure. He sees no reason to feel uncomfortable when they are in the same boat. He declares that if there is something Wenji wants to ask, he will listen. If it is doable, he will do it. But if it is not, he doesn't have to. Hearing the reply, Wenji reacts sharply, saying that even listening can put his life in danger. He warns that if Aster listens and refuses, he will be killed. Our protagonist, frustrated, says Wenji can try to kill him, because they only live once anyway. Hearing that, Wenji rises as an insane aura surges, yet Aster sits there unaffected. Wenji then smiles, admitting that our boy has passed the test. He speaks more comfortably now and says that he really needed someone he could trust who was not another Blander. He clarifies that he does not have high expectations for the wayward sons of the Dirt and White regions. but a family head with a special reputation placed such a person by the young master's side, so there must be more to it. Before he can continue, our protagonist interrupts, mentioning the quarrel between the youngest sibling and himself. Wenji asks him to choose whether they should speak casually or formally. Aster agrees to the former, and Wenji says a proper pretext has come up. It is natural for an older brother to call the parties involved for a discussion. The words make our boy silently wonder why a vice dean of a magic academy would use a younger sibling as an excuse to involve himself in conflict. Meanwhile, Wenji explains that it is a difficult situation for him to step forward first. He confirms it is not a power struggle, as the Blander family is tight-knit. The real issue is that Wenji is under surveillance by the Declan family. When asked why, he explains that he is currently researching the Declan family's heavenly origin magic, and it seems they found out. This magic is a secret parasite technique only those with the Declan bloodline can learn. However, Wenji obtained it through a fortunate opportunity. Before he can say more, our boy interrupts, asking how someone who should have died long ago is still alive. If Wenji was researching from the Blander standpoint, then naturally he must have researched a way to destroy it. Wenji responds that the Declan family is ruthless. If he had only researched destruction, even the vice dean would have tried to kill him. Initially, he intended only to find a way to destroy it, but then he tried the heavenly origin magic, the root of all Declan's secret arts. He admits it is an incomplete method to improve something already perfect. He confesses that now he cannot stop and asks if Aster can understand his feelings. Hearing this speech, the realization hits Aster. Wenji is not just crazy, he is extremely crazy. To our boy, Wenji is no ordinary genius. He wonders if Wenji also researched this kind of forbidden knowledge within the walls of his own family. The timing feels perfect. In his past life, when Declan annihilated the Blander family, the core reason was Wenji's research on the new Thousand Circle. Farron had struck first because he recognized the potential of that research from the beginning. Aster now realizes this is also why Farron was so absurdly strong. Wenji interrupts these thoughts, asking if Aster is available, as the matter must be handled on a much larger scale. Our hero composes himself and asks what Wenji came looking for. The Vice Dean explains that he did not report the Thousand Circle research to the Blander family, because he suspects a spy has been planted somewhere. Despite his searching, he could never find them. Hearing this, our protagonist wonders if the secret research has already been exposed. He suggests that the most suspicious person is usually a secretary, an assistant, or someone close, but Wenji disagrees, convinced the breach is connected to the acquisition route. Aster suggests that if they track the acquisition route, the security formula must have been intentionally leaked. Laughing, Wenji agrees. The moment he realized he was being attacked, he deliberately unraveled a part of the security formula himself. He admits he does not exactly want to die, but when our boy suggests siding with Declan, Wenji refuses, mentioning he has his own reasons. Since Aster is not tied to the Blander family, this is something Wenji must handle secretly for his own vengeance. He reveals this is joint research, but with the part he is currently responsible for, he can't make any progress. He hands papers to Aster, promising a proper reward if he delivers them to Professor Perun of Xenian Academy. In exchange, he offers the healing light spell. After a moment of thought, Aster sees a golden opportunity and counters. He will take healing light as risk compensation and also the new Thousand Circle when it is completed. Only then, he says, can they truly be called companions in the same boat. Wenji calls him shameless, but Aster refuses to back down. After thinking, Wenji finally agrees. Since our hero has not mastered the Thousand Circle yet, it is useless for now anyway. Once the new Thousand Circle is complete, he will give it to him. But Wenji adds a condition. Until this thesis is finished, he may need the help of Aster, and he would like to help him in return when the time comes. Aster agrees and jokingly says he can't read, though he then brushes it aside. He collects the papers and asks if Professor Perun is trustworthy. Wenji reveals that from academy days through assistant professorship, the two competed fiercely for first and second place. But when Wenji returned to the Blander family, that rivalry truly ended. The way he speaks makes Aster wonder if Wenji meant he was always the one on top. Later that night, our boy opens a bag containing many books and thinks about the subspace pouch. Wenji packed them so the papers would not be found if he were searched, though he wonders why Wenji included so much useless stuff with it. He then finds a letter from Wenji, stating he already paid the essential magical taxes and selected the books Aster must master for the future. Wenji also provides a study order, asking Aster to cultivate the intellect befitting his stature. Our protagonist likes the gift, calling Wenji a genius for organizing the pathway from basic magic to advanced step-by-step. He then makes a list of book sponsors and writes Wenji's name at the top. The volumes total around 132, excluding Healing Light and the New Thousand Circle thesis. His plan to install the Healing Light Dreamweaver in the tower so everyone can see it is for later, something he will discuss with Damien as a friend's privilege. The 132 volumes Wenji provided form a separate category, indeed a foundation course for anyone who wishes to study magic. Aster realizes that instead of merely stocking books, this collection will become the identity of the tower, a place of learning for those who seek it. Meanwhile, in the magic tower, Wenji stands thinking about our protagonist. At first he thought Aster was merely useful, and planned to test him by entrusting the thesis, ready to discard him if not, but now he admits that our boy is becoming interesting. Remembering the moment our hero told him to just kill him makes Wenji laugh, since it was meant as nothing more than a threat test. However, Wenji also had a reason not to kill him. Although he remembers the eyes of Aster, they were not empty words. They carried real threat and conviction. Wenji calls Aster different and interesting, someone hiding a lot, and finds it good. He admits he has finally found a peer who can stand on the same level and look in the same direction. Plus, our boy wants the results of his work, which is a completely new feeling for Wenji. The only remaining question is whether Aster actually cannot read, but he quickly dismisses the thought, refusing to believe it. The next morning, Aster stands in his room when someone calls him, saying it is time to depart. As they walk, Lanzi holds his bag, explaining that after arrival at the academy, there will be simple document registration. Both Damien and our boy are exempt from entrance exams. Seeing him well-dressed, she happily praises him, saying he looks like a full-fledged academy student. He thanks her politely, thinking about being exempt and calling it the typical privilege of pretentious families, special admission. Yet, he is not upset about the exemption. Just then, Damien arrives and calls out energetically for his friend. They board the carriage where Lady Gammo tells Damien to be safe and warmly tells our hero that it is a great opportunity and hopes he achieves the results he desires. He thanks her and gets inside the carriage. Later, Aster thinks to himself that the results he desires are exactly what he has planned. He thinks of the academy and the countless patrons waiting there, planning to seize them. As the cart moves forward, he silently asks his future classmates to wait for him. In the cart, Aster brings out a book. Now convinced that Wenji is truly an exceptional magus, our boy reflects that while the fundamentals of magic are simple, inspiration differs greatly. He compares magic to water. For some, it is the water of life. For others, it is a disastrous fluid. The difference lies entirely in perspective. After thoroughly studying all the arcane tomes in the subspace pouch, our protagonist comes to the realization that even with identical principles, each noble house has developed magic in its own way. He also notices that Wenji's methods distinctly echo Declan's celestial principles. His thoughts are interrupted when Damien tells him they have finally arrived at Xenian Academy. Aster glances outside as Lanzi announces the end of the carriage service, explaining that according to the Foundation headmaster's teachings, everyone must walk in on foot during admission, regardless of status. With that, they part ways. She wishes both students well and leaves with the cart. Damien urges our hero to hurry, worrying that if they arrive late to the entrance ceremony, there might not be any seats left. Aster finds the idea ridiculous, an entrance ceremony in a village-style auditorium with first-come, first-served seating. But remembering this was what Lanzi said, he realizes it was probably a lie meant to motivate Damien not to dawdle. He lets it go, thinking that while Lanzi may be blind to the truth of the seating, at least she is not shameless in her manipulation. Soon, they reach the room where the entrance ceremony is being held. Many students are already seated. Damien looks around and admits that Lanzi was right. Meanwhile, Aster pulls out a paper to check the class list and seating numbers. Damien, growing more anxious, urges our boy to hurry, afraid they will miss out on a seat. Aster asks him to wait, silently noting the irony that Damien, who initially did not want to come to the academy, is now so eager to participate. At that moment, Damien falls to the floor after bumping into someone. Our protagonist quickly checks on him, and Damien assures him he is fine, apologizing to the individual for not paying attention. As they start to leave, the man complains about saliva on his sleeve. Judging by his bearing, Aster assumes he is a noble-blooded heir. Before he can process it further, Damien steps up and starts wiping the saliva with his fingers, promising to polish it until it sparkles. The gesture only irritates the guy more. Aster waits silently, thinking that if things continue this way, a fight will break out. The guy then prepares to punch Damien, but our protagonist intervenes and blocks it in time. He tells the guy to stop and warns him not to make a mistake. The guy questions his identity, and Damien quickly steps forward, calling Aster his friend. Hearing this, the man pulls back, noting that not many would take a hit for a friend, and calls our boy a good companion. But he warns that today, Aster will have to prove that loyalty once again. Silently, our hero thinks that mingling so much with new classmates on the first day is a bit too much. He also wonders if this guy settles all disputes with fists rather than words. Their exchange draws attention, and soon other students gather, speculating whether a fight is about to start. When asked about their identities, one student identifies the challenger as Dolampe's heir, but cannot identify Aster or Damien. They begin debating who might win. Suddenly, another student steps in, scolding everyone for standing around while a fight brews. When someone asks if the fight should be stopped, the newcomer shouts that they cannot fight properly with the crowd so close, and demands everyone clear the space. Mage students begin setting up a barrier. Excitement builds as students even start betting on the outcome of the brawl. The match begins. The big guy introduces himself as Exter, proud son of House Delampe, and demands the name of our protagonist. But Aster simply replies that he does not have a grand bloodline and insists on being considered just a random guy. Realization dawns among the crowd that Aster is not noble-born, but it does not faze Exter. He remarks that since the narrow stage puts a mage at a disadvantage, he will graciously let Aster attack first. Our boy finds him amusing and mocks him for talking too much. The taunt enrages Exter, who steps forward to punch, but Aster dodges easily and declares that he is not alone. There are two of them. Suddenly, our hero steps ahead and lands a strong punch squarely on Exter's face. Exter believed he could easily withstand punches from a Magic Academy student. However, he ends up pushed back by the sheer impact. As he wonders how a punch could be so heavy, he starts to question whether Aster is truly a magician. Meanwhile, Damien steps forward and applies healing magic to him, causing Exter to wonder why they would even bother with such a gesture. In the midst of this confusion, our boy suddenly rushes in again, landing a sharp kick. Countless punches and kicks rain down on Exter as he tries to defend himself, all while Damien continues to cast his healing light. Exter's heart pounds in his chest, and he admits to himself that he would rather take the blows and faint than surrender. The realization stings as he admits that he might actually be afraid. A student in the crowd shouts encouragement, urging Exter not to hold back. Pulling himself together, he shouts at Aster, calling him a mere magician, and launches another attack only to fail again. He tries once more, yelling at our protagonist not to underestimate him, then charges forward with a punch. The crowd cheers, believing he has finally succeeded. Even Exter feels the impact as his fist connects, but it lands with surprising lightness. Meanwhile, Aster, though struck, remains largely unaffected and flips easily back to his feet, almost unscathed. Seeing him stand unfazed, Exter grows even angrier, shouting once more as he charges forward. On the other side, our hero observes how Damien keeps healing Exter and decides to end the confrontation with a single blow. He gathers energy from the collision of magical particles, blue energy swirling around his hand. This technique utilizes magic, yet belongs to neither martial arts nor traditional spells. It is a pure application of magical properties. Aster charges ahead and delivers a powerful punch. The mage students maintaining the barrier struggle to contain the force, questioning the nature of the energy. As the pressure eases, they see Exter collapse to the ground, leaving everyone staring in disbelief and speechless. Breaking the silence, our protagonist encourages the onlookers to cheer, and the crowd erupts in pride, roaring praises for Aster. Damien quickly approaches, celebrating the victory, and our boy gently pats his head. Meanwhile, from a distance, a figure watches them both, impressed by the fight despite the fact that Aster is a magic student, though still deeming the spectacle rather vulgar. At that moment, another person steps out, shouting about fighting on the very first day of the entrance ceremony. The teacher calls out the students responsible for the commotion and begins to question everyone, unaware of who actually initiated the chaos. Witnessing the situation, our protagonist silently acknowledges that he caused trouble on the first day, but remains unconcerned. He considers slipping away, thinking it would be easy since everyone seemed to enjoy the fight. However, before he can act, Damien loudly admits that they are the ones who were fighting, leaving our boy helpless. Meanwhile, Exter still lies collapsed on the ground. Damien and Aster stand before the teacher. Since both have already admitted their involvement, the teacher agrees to let the incident slide this time without any penalty, noting that the other student did not seem to be badly hurt. However, the teacher decides to keep an eye on both of them from now onward. Soon after, the two return to the entrance ceremony, which has still not officially started. As soon as they walk in, the atmosphere shifts. Everyone begins talking about them, offering praises and wondering how a magic track student could fight with such physical intensity. Damien notices the staring and feels quite good about the attention. But on the other hand, Aster feels awkward, thinking that he has practically become a celebrity overnight. Eventually, following the guidance of the staff, they find their assigned seats. Damien assumes their new friends must have saved the area for them, calling the gesture awesome. Just then, the headmaster enters and begins his speech. The address continues for a long while, and our boy tries to figure out the stamina of the headmaster, who is able to deliver such a lengthy speech while standing perfectly still. His attention then shifts to Damien, who has ended up falling fast asleep. At that moment, someone calls out to the headmaster, asking him to come somewhere urgently. The headmaster wonders what could possibly be more important than the entrance ceremony, but his informer whispers something into his ear that changes his expression. The headmaster finally apologizes to the students, stating that something urgent has arisen. He ends his speech abruptly but assures everyone that the ceremony will continue. He waves to the side, and a lady in black with long hair appears on stage, shouting for everyone's attention. Her voice is loud enough to wake Damien and snap everyone's focus back to the front. She introduces herself as Jaira, claiming she will continue the ceremony in place of the headmaster. Jaira then begins the freshman oath. First, she calls out the representative of the magic division, Dahlia de Denai. Dahlia steps onto the stage while the crowd whispers, wondering why a member of the Denai family took the entrance exam instead of accepting a direct recommendation. They question her skills, but most believe that if her abilities were truly lacking, the Denai family would never have allowed her to risk the family name on an exam. Aster watches her as well, thinking that if the Declan family is the foremost mage house in the East, then Denai is the second most renowned. In his past life, Dahlia grew to become the representative mage of her house. She was incredibly capable, and even at the time of his retirement as a troubleshooter, our hero had never received help from her. Despite their history, they never got along very well, and others usually referred to them as bad friends. Nevertheless, our boy feels a sense of familiarity seeing Dahlia joining this year's class. Soon after, Jaira calls out the next representative, this time for the martial arts division, a guy named Paul. Our boy notices that Paul does not seem to be from a noble house, since no family name was announced. He reflects that since even Exter's family barely has noble recognition, the true high noble houses must be fuming at being represented by commoners or low-ranked names. Back on stage, Jaira introduces the professors who will be teaching Class 172. Meanwhile, Dahlia, who is descending from the stage, makes eye contact with our hero. To him, however, the look does not matter. In the middle of her descent, she suddenly falls off the stairs, but Aster stays unbothered, simply waiting for Professor Perun to show up. After a few other teachers, Mr. Perun finally steps forward to introduce himself. He informs the students that he will be in charge of the basic principle of magiology course. Witnessing him, Aster admits he had been expecting an atmosphere more like Wenji's, but Perun seems to be completely different. However, knowing that Wenji wears a mask of a perfect gentleman in society, our boy decides not to judge the professor too quickly. Jaira finally announces the conclusion of the ceremony, asking all students to follow the leaders to their dormitories. Aster wakes Damien, who is still groggy. When Damien asks if it is over, Aster jokingly says that he got caught sleeping, and they have been exiled from the academy. As a result, Damien screams his lungs out in a panic. Later in the hallway, our boy walks with his bag, thinking about how easily Damien was fooled by a little teasing. Reaching the top floor, Aster finally enters his room, calling the academy facilities impressive. He finds a box on his bed and assumes these are the standard living supplies. He learns that the academy issues the same items to all students to maintain a baseline of equality. He starts arranging his things, well aware that even the smallest personal item can eventually show one's true status once students begin buying their own belongings. Just then, Paul shows up, revealing himself as Aster's roommate. Although Aster finds Paul's expression a bit annoyed, the martial artist steps inside and declares that they will live quietly. Paul admits that he does not care what our hero does. He can stay up late or do as he pleases, as long as they do not interfere in each other's affairs. He even goes as far as to request that they do not speak to one another after this initial conversation. When he finishes his cold introduction, he asks for Aster's opinion on the arrangement. Aster stays silent as Paul questions why he isn't answering. However, Aster stands quietly, thinking that everything about Paul makes him curious. Since Paul entered as the top student, Aster wonders just how good he really is. To check, our boy slightly closes the distance between them, which makes Paul react sharply. Observing the way Paul holds his sword, ensuring it does not bump into anything when he draws it, our hero acknowledges that it's not bad. Before anything more can be observed or said, Damien calls out for Aster. He simply replies to Paul that he is not doing anything, just heading out, and taps Paul on the shoulder, telling him to do whatever he wants, but not to complain if he starts singing past midnight in return. Soon after, our boy stands with Damien outside, who immediately asks about his roommate. Aster simply replies that he does not know, making Damien wonder how he could not know anything about the person sharing his room. Quietly, our protagonist thinks to himself that he was busy. Meanwhile, Damien is already set on touring the academy, informing him that Lanzi said there is a ton to see at the academy, and that it is a must to explore everything on the first day. However, they have to go together with a friend. Aster is aware that the academy is vast, and that is exactly why students are encouraged to get familiar with the layout early so they do not get lost. Therefore, he agrees to go. But besides that, there is something on his mind. Silently, our boy admits that something is brushing against his senses, although not as strongly as in his previous life. Just then, he notices Declan troubleshooters. He wonders how many there are and firmly asks Damien to look around. They wander the academy while Damien looks here and there, completely excited. After seeing the lake, he complains that he does not have one at home, making our boy realize why Lanzi stuck him with this kid. It feels like he is babysitting. He finds it tiring, though he knows Damien has a peculiar temperament and simply gives back what is given to him. He suggests Damien ask his family to build one. Damien excitedly declares that he will ask for an even bigger one at home. He even starts thinking of a name for the lake, but quickly gets distracted by the statue of a mage, calling it cool and declaring that he will ask for one as well. Aster suggests making it in the form of a dragon, since the scales would look gorgeous. Damien loves the idea, and they continue discussing it further. Meanwhile, at home, Lanzi suddenly wonders why she is feeling chills. After they finish seeing everything, they decide to head back. Silently, our hero has counted about 7 troubleshooters in total, and if he includes the ones he has not yet identified, there are roughly 10. As they walk, they see the second magic hall, which is where Professor Perun's library is. Aster is fairly certain that their target must be Professor Perun. He also admits that Declan should know Wenji has allies, although naturally they would start suspecting Professor Perun, who has strong connections in the area. Just then, our boy senses another troubleshooter near the grass. Until now, he had wondered why they were not tailing him yet, but now they have latched on at just the right time. Therefore, he decides to find out how much they really know. Soon after, as night falls, a troubleshooter enters an area where he meets another one. When asked where the others are, his comrade informs him that they have already gone ahead because headquarters has issued an emergency directive. They have been asked to gather at the target's nest. They are currently observing the sub-target, since the main target's tail has been stepped on. He also reveals that they have obtained meaningful intel, and at midnight the objective will be delivered to the sub-target. The information makes the first troubleshooter think about Wenji, who is the first and main target. They know Wenji has already made his moves, and if the orders have reached them, then among the many sub-targets, their surveillance subject must be Professor Perun. Suddenly, he realizes something, questioning the absence of the single numbers. They are essentially being told to break through those monster professors themselves. He believes that at least 1 or 2 single numbers should join them if they are dealing with such opponents. However, his comrade replies that they will not be coming. Instead, the fire demon Callahan will be joining them. Callahan is the vice leader of Declan's Mage Corps, the Red Jewel. The troubleshooter acknowledges that Callahan would be enough, though cold-blooded and willing to use any means necessary for a mission. In other words, they are being asked to risk their lives. On the other hand, his comrade believes the matter may not necessarily escalate into open conflict, since exposing a well-known mage from a noble family in such an operation would be a burden. Hearing that, the first one feels somewhat relieved. They decide to leave quickly, knowing that if they do not join up soon, their chances of survival will drop. They take their leave. Meanwhile, our boy, who was hiding nearby, hears all of it. Callahan was already in his prime back when our hero was still active. After the Declan family staked their survival on the battle against the Blander family, Callahan remained loyal to the collapsing house, proving his unwavering devotion. Even now he is dangerous. However, his true golden age came after the war with Blander, the inferno of Declan that no one could stop. This man carved his name into history as a legendary war mage. This also means Aster will eventually have to capture him. Callahan's magic is one of Declan's flame art arcana, and as a mage recognized across the continent, he is worth the risk. Now our boy wonders why one troubleshooter suddenly targeted him alone and then withdrew. It turns out Aster had stumbled upon an unexpected gain. However, there is still one question: the tragedy they mentioned and the target they spoke of. Wenji's thesis is in Aster's possession, and yet they said that the target would be delivered to the secondary mark, Professor Perun. Our hero is certain the thesis he has cannot be fake, and there is no chance the target they mentioned is anything other than that document. Therefore, the document being delivered tonight must be a forged thesis. Later that night, Paul dresses himself in gloves and a cloak. When he glances back, he finds Aster asleep in his bed. However, our boy is not actually there. He has just left a dummy behind. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Perun sits in silence, thinking about Declan. He tolerated them even when they crossed the line, but he did nothing more. Yet now, they are trying to intrude into his territory, and looking at the marks spread so boldly, he wonders what they mean. Just then, he is interrupted as a cloaked figure appears. Perun recognizes him right away. It is Paul. Perun continues speaking, suggesting that next time, Paul should learn to identify Aster traits first, since that is the very foundation of covert work. Not replying, Paul silently hands over an envelope. The professor reads through it and recognizes it immediately as being from Wenji. He wonders how it was even delivered while evading Declan's surveillance, and yet was caught so easily. However, Perun refuses to believe that Wenji could be captured so simply. He wonders what trick is being played. Suddenly, an explosion erupts as Callahan finally appears, greeting Professor Perun. He wonders if a professor who spends every waking moment in a lab would even know who he is. Then, he notices Paul and calls him a mercenary. Just by looking at the hand sword, he can tell that Paul knows about him. Callahan then asks Professor Perun if he knows him. Perun bluntly refuses, telling him to get out immediately. Hearing that, Callahan laughs. He has never been treated like this before. He finds it entertaining and declares that he will keep things simple. He says he will kill Paul, and leave Perun alive but with one arm and one eye. Callahan prepares to strike Paul, but Professor Perun steps in and shields him at the last moment. With his skills, an eruption blasts through the ground. As the smoke clears, Perun calls out for Paul and tells him to save his life, declaring that from now on, he will not look at him as a student, but a mercenary in his own right. Paul reacts sharply and agrees instantly, while Perun notices that the alarm still has not rung even after that massive blast. It becomes clear that Declan's lackeys cast a blackout spell. Therefore, the only one Perun can rely on now is Paul. Meanwhile, standing before them, Callahan spots the envelope, aware that it indeed came from Blander. He adds that Perun does not seem like the type who will hand it over quietly and asks if he wants to play. In an instant, he activates his skill. A magical circle forms and golden flames erupt, and the cliff begins to reshape around Paul and Perun as he laughs wildly. In response, Perun activates his own skill, unleashing a surge of blue light that destroys the entire floor of the building. Lightning erupts skyward, and our protagonist sees it from the other building. The realization hits him that things have finally turned serious. Wearing his cloak and mask, Aster steps forward, declaring that now he is not Aster, but number 1, the troubleshooter. Standing there with his mask and cloak, Aster finally decides to begin. He silently prays to the moon, seeking permission to act as a righteous troubleshooter once more, even though, in truth, he was never officially one. With that resolve, our boy leaps into the air and rushes forward. Meanwhile, back in the battle, Callahan unleashes flames toward Paul, who struggles desperately to keep up. The only reason Paul has managed to survive this long is the talisman he received earlier, which is actually a protective artifact. Before he can think further, Professor Perun shouts at him to move aside as the professor charges forward to attack again. Their powers clash, erupting violently. Perun admits that Paul isn't bad, and is surprisingly reliable. Just then, the guard's sword begins to glow, making him question if ether is coating the blade or if it is some kind of enchantment spell. Perun asks whether he can withstand the next strike, and Paul responds firmly that he can. After all, they are well past the point of retreat. If they fail to hold the line now, they will surely die. Their enemy laughs, finding this pairing of mage and guard interesting as he launches another vicious attack. Flames erupt, but Paul manages to block the blow. However, Perun knows the guard will eventually be overwhelmed. If things continue this way, they will soon be dragged to their deaths. Consequently, he resolves to play his trump card. When the amount of mana present in nature is limited, and two commanding entities issue orders at once, control of the flow becomes a direct contest of strength. Perun surges forward, unleashing a massive blast of energy that scatters violently across the area. Callahan sees it as a challenge and prepares to clash head-on. Energy wraps around the war mage as the ground cracks beneath them. The massive eruption tears through the surroundings, leaving the building in ruins as Callahan and the professor are thrown high into the air. On the ground, Paul lies collapsed and exhausted. Helplessly, he thinks that if things were going to escalate like this, they should have just fought each other from the beginning. A raging energy forms above as a giant tornado, and other troubleshooters finally arrive on the scene, stunned by the sheer power. They hesitate, realizing that rushing in now would be suicide. One tries to determine how many allies remain, but before he can finish, our protagonist sweeps in like a storm, knocking them all aside. Someone shouts that it is an ambush. Amid the swirling chaos, both Perun and Callahan suddenly notice the newcomer's presence as he lands before them. Confusion flickers across their faces. Aster lands nearby and announces his arrival, demanding they behold his entrance. Callahan shouts in irritation and fury, but Aster rushes straight at him, declaring that this place will become the mage's grave. He grabs Callahan by the throat. At that moment, the enemy activates his skill, resulting in a devastating blast that pushes Aster away. The backlash hits hard, yet Aster remains standing, completely unscathed, as the remaining troubleshooters surround him. On the ground, Callahan quickly pulls out a potion and drinks it to suppress the mana backlash, wondering what kind of monster this masked man could be. Meanwhile, our protagonist keeps fighting, tossing troubleshooters aside. His movements hold not a single wasted gesture, and his magic remains precise and instantaneous. Callahan watches with widening eyes, realizing he is actually impressed. Still, he snarls and activates another spell, shouting that he does not know who this masked man is, but he will kill him regardless. Countless magic circles blaze into existence, scattering everywhere. Aster faces the energy as the explosions erupt around him. Standing there, Callahan wonders if he succeeded in hurting our boy. Although a few other troubleshooters got caught up in his attack, he does not care about them, as he only wants to complete the mission. Bodies fall to the ground as Callahan assumes the masked man must be eliminated among them. Holding his potions, he feels relieved, thinking about grouping up with the remaining troubleshooters to subdue Professor Perun. He takes out a potion, ready to drink, but just then, a voice calls out to him. The voice says that Callahan may look like some unhygienic lunatic on the outside, but deep down, he is as cold and sly as a snake. Aster declares that he was aware all along of Callahan's plan to blow him away along with the troubleshooters. Our protagonist prepares his attack and states that Callahan's coldness will be the cause of his death. A strong beam of light cuts through the air as Callahan stares wide-eyed, unable to process it as it pierces straight through his head. He falls to the ground dead. Meanwhile, Aster is impressed anyway, since any other mage would have died from that ambush back then, but Callahan still managed to counterattack. The war mage's reflexes and judgment were as sharp as ever, but his final spell actually worked in our boy's favor. If Callahan had joined forces with the troubleshooters to fight for attention, Aster would have lost, and his mana resources are still running low. He then goes ahead and, after checking, finds a bag on Callahan's body. Most battle mages do not trust anyone, so they carry their grimoires themselves. Also, the spatial pouches have a built-in owner recognition spell. Aster keeps the bag and decides to undo that later. Interrupting his thoughts, Professor Perun shows up. Aster tells him that he is late, prompting Perun to reveal that he was busy freezing some other troubleshooters. Gathering energy in his hand, Perun questions if our boy is one of them. Our hero stands firm and asks what Perun actually thinks, saying he just took out one of Declan's lunatic allies. After a brief silence, Perun recognizes that the way Aster is calling them lunatic makes it clear that Wenji has sent him, so he does not need to deal with him. Perun then asks about mercenary, who approached him earlier, inquiring if he is splitting the research into 2 papers. Aster says it must be fake, and Wenji must have planned it using a decoy to lure the rats into the open. He probably wanted to tighten security around the city of Hayes and the academy, while also cutting down the Declan family's influence. Silently, our boy also notes that even though the troubleshooters used blackout magic, the fight was intense. Even if the report was delayed, it makes no sense that the Imperial Knights are not here yet. All this makes him think the Declan family must have warded them off too. Interrupting, Professor Perun questions if our hero is the main courier, and Aster immediately hands over the thesis. Reading it, Perun asks if Aster knew what was inside, and Aster confirms. Perun reacts sharply, while our boy admits that he does not mind a fight, asking Professor Perun if he wants one, since he would hate to lose a good ally. Hearing that, Perun decides to receive the paper safely, admitting that he would rather not lose an ally either, and leaves it at that. He then demands to know if there is anything Aster would like in return. Since Wenji only trusts one kind of person, someone whose desires are clear and align with his own, Professor Perun believes our hero must be the same and wants to give something in return to earn his trust. After thinking for a while, Aster asks for a book. When Perun looks confused, our boy explains that he is going to build a tower, tall and grand, and he will place books for anyone to read. He admits that he would like one written from Perun's perspective on arcane science. Perun accepts this request amiably, saying that while not everyone would understand it, he finds the idea entertaining. Our protagonist decides to take his leave, but Perun asks how they will stay in contact. Aster says that he does not usually take a man's number, but pulls out a necklace-type item and tosses it to Perun, informing him that it is a communication crystal. The 2 halves are linked. When one breaks, the other shatters too. He tells Perun to break one shard to call him, or break more than one if there is trouble. Perun catches it, and after a brief silence, he says that he is not into men either, although Aster has already left, leaving Perun wondering why he suddenly feels filthy. Not long after, the Imperial Knights arrive at the scene. They quickly secure the area and temporarily evacuate the Academy students to prevent any possible follow-up attack. It is our boy's cue to blend in among the students. He and Damien walk together, and Damien gets curious to know where our protagonist was, prompting him to reveal that he just came back and had seen something. Silently, though, Aster thinks that the bodies of Callahan and the other troubleshooters make the evidence clear, and the Declan family will stay quiet for a while now. On the other hand, Damien notices that Aster looks bothered. Aster ignores it, wondering why his sigil reacted during that fight, since it usually does not respond at all. But when blocking Callahan's spell, he felt power resonate through the barrier. After all, it did help him block the counterattack, so he cannot complain. It is not that the barrier was threatened, but rather the rejection phenomenon, a technique elemental mages often use which prevents the caster from being harmed by their own magic. Our protagonist says out loud that he does not get it, prompting Damien to ask about it. Although he ignores it again, still stuck thinking why it reacted then of all times and what exactly triggers it, as he decides to investigate further. He looks at the largest library in the East, Lapider, inside the academy, expecting to find some clues there. Just then, someone calls out from behind, greeting him, and the guy introduces himself as Chenbi. Aster is confused, as the newcomer says that our boy fights pretty well, making him doubt if this person saw him fighting that time. And if he got to know about his identity, that would be bad. He even wonders if our hero should kill him. Chenbi mentions that the fight our hero had with the combat division during the entrance ceremony was amazing, questioning how he was able to fight like that. Meanwhile, Aster looks at him oddly, thinking that rather than leaving a bad mark, he has made quite a name for himself, although Chenbi says his name without any respect. Aster turns around, saying that the guy from before was a bit lagging in ether, and adds that things will be different next time. As our boy decides to leave with Damien, Chenbi confesses that he wanted to be with them, since he hasn't really gotten close to anyone yet, and it is very awkward joining other groups. These words make our protagonist reflect that the academy may promise equal treatment regardless of status, but in reality, students act differently. For some, like Aster from a poor family, it is only natural to drift around the edges. Although it does not matter much to our hero, he simply looks at Chenbi and tells him to suit himself. Chenbi thanks him kindly, admitting he was a bit nervous. He says that when something like what happened yesterday occurs, being alone just feels off, and Aster agrees with him. They then start a conversation, and our boy wonders if this is how a normal conversation feels. He looks up at the sky, thinking that in this life he has only ever run into lunatics, and because of that, he had forgotten what ordinary felt like. With a smile, our protagonist silently declares that now it is time to begin academy life. The next morning, in the assembly, our hero sits with Damien, who is already sleepy. Just then, Chenbi joins them from behind, greeting them. He sits down and points out how they have to attend class after all the chaos yesterday, and Aster agrees, calling it pretty harsh. Although judging by their talk yesterday, Aster can tell that Chenbi is not from a noble family, nor from a wealthy background, yet he does not seem timid at all, and is even quite cheerful. Whatever he observed makes our boy think of Chenbi as a decent person. Interrupting his thoughts, Chenbi informs them that their M3 house room professor is Professor Jaira. Our hero looks confused at the name, prompting Chenbi to freak out, saying that Professor Jaira is the one who single-handedly slaughtered a horde of trolls. As they talk, Jaira finally shows up, and seeing her, Aster remembers that she is the one who stood on stage at the entrance ceremony. She steps onto the platform, simply introducing herself, and announces that there was a small disturbance yesterday, but it is not worth worrying about. She asks students to focus on their studies. Before starting their first lesson, Jaira decides to start with mana measurement, declaring that the measurement evaluates both the quantity and quality of one's mana. She then asks which of the two they think is more important. A student raises her hand. Jaira first asks her to introduce herself. She introduces herself as Argan and continues, saying that she does not believe there is a defined answer, but if one already possesses a certain level of mana, she would say its quality matters most. When asked the reason, she says that when facing a mage of equal power, the one with superior mana quality will naturally hold the advantage. Meanwhile, our boy considers this just a textbook answer, since the quality of mana affects accuracy, stability, and spell power. Even if one has plenty of mana, it is useless if one cannot hit the target. Jaira reacts sharply and then asks about Argan's family. Argan fumbles a bit but says that she is from Baron Palaeum's household. Hearing that, Jaira makes a face, saying she thought so, as Argan's eyes fill with tears. Jaira then shouts if anyone else wants to try answering. Eventually, she points at a random student, asking his name. The guy answers that it is Ippel. He gets up and says that he thinks mana quantity might be more important in large-scale battles. Total mana would have a bigger impact. Hearing the answer, Aster agrees, thinking that from another perspective, quantity could outweigh quality. In short, depending on a few variables, both can be equally vital. Jaira again seems frustrated as she asks about his family. All this makes our protagonist wonder if there is some rule he does not know about. She keeps repeating it. Calling out someone else, she asks the same questions, and then ignores them after learning their family name. She continues, while our boy wonders what kind of answer could possibly ruin this interrogation. Argan is still crying while Jaira says that she has heard all of their answers, and every one of them was close to being correct. She reveals that the truth is there was never a correct answer to begin with. That means what she wanted was not the right answer either, and she asks them to think about what kind of answer they gave her. She questions if it was even their own thought, or if they were just trying to guess what she wanted to hear. She believes that a mage must never lose their conviction, no matter when or where. One must not be swept away by others' eyes. They must have the strength to uphold their will to the end. She then points at everyone, questioning if they can really call that the mindset of a true mage. Silence fills the room as she continues again, saying that from now on, they must become true mages. And that is the message she wanted to convey today, asking them to keep it close to their hearts. Aster is satisfied that in the end he was right, even as he finds her way of teaching a lesson kind of twisted. She then calls students for the mana measurement. She calls out Argan, declaring that she will serve as the M3 class's Magic Division representative. Jaira admits that Argan's earlier answer was quite impressive, and asks her to record her classmates' mana levels. Argan runs to the stage, thanking the teacher. Meanwhile, Chenbi, sitting right behind our protagonist, says that he is jealous, prompting our hero to wonder what exactly makes him jealous. Back on stage, Jaira calls out for the assistant professor, who shows up with a glowing orb, and the students whisper if that is a mana measurement device. Jaira is aware that most of them must not have seen it before, and declares that it is time to find out their mana levels. She adds that no one knows that among them, there just might be a monster. Jaira explains the usage details, asking Argan to place her hand on the crystal orb and channel her mana into it. She does as instructed, and the orb begins to glow. In no time, her mana number appears as 4. Jaira points out that everyone can see it clearly among the various indicators. The key one is located in the center, representing the property index, in other words, the quality of mana, ranging from level 1 to level 10. Argan is at level 4. Considering last year's freshman average was level 3, Jaira finds it quite impressive. She then asks to measure the amount of mana next, instructing Argan to channel her mana as before. She states that the mana amount scale goes up to level 100 in total, and Argon's level is 17, which is slightly higher than last year's average of level 15. Judging from both the quality and quantity of Argon's mana, Jaira can tell how diligent she has been. Meanwhile, sitting with the other students, Aster thinks about Argon's future, believing she will become a devoted graduate student someday. Soon after, due to some urgent work, Jaira takes her leave, asking the students to continue measuring under the assistant professor's supervision. Some students depart, discussing the techniques they need to focus on. Meanwhile, sitting there, Chenbi asks our boy to measure his mana as well. Our protagonist eventually agrees, but suddenly he hears students shouting that someone's refinement index has reached level 6, and their mana amount level is 20. The professor asks for the student's name, and she introduces herself as Furion de Denai. Aster immediately remembers the name. It is the same house as Dahlia's, and judging by the different hair colors, he is convinced Furion must be from a collateral line. The assistant professor was expecting such results from a noble family's heiress, and calls it an impressive value indeed. However, he notes that the mana capacity is slightly lacking compared to the refinement level 6, but it is still impressive overall. Just then, Damien wakes up because of the noise and asks what is happening. When asked, our hero first tells him to sleep again, but then thinks he should not be sleeping like that, so he explains that they are measuring mana. Damien shows no interest at first, but then he suddenly shouts that he will try too, catching everyone's attention. Traveling to the stage together, our protagonist and Damien go to check their mana. Everyone recognizes Damien as the younger heir of the Blander family, and Aster as the one who beat the kid on the first day, while Chenbi is someone new among them. Our hero feels awkward, since he did not want to be known for beating someone up. When they reach the stage, the assistant professor recognizes Damien and asks him to give it a try. Damien steps forward and places his hand on the orb, as the other students stare in awe. Damien's score reaches 9 and his total mana level is 67. Students stare in shock, shouting if that is an error, while our boy observes quietly, thinking that this is how ordinary people react when they meet a genius, someone beyond what common sense can comprehend, a dazzling, towering wall. However, Aster already knew Damien was a genius, but did not expect him to surpass the average by that much. Now he understands how a monster of splendor came to be, and that Damien was simply born different. Our protagonist admits if Damien had devoted himself in his past life, the entire continent might have changed. Although he believes this time it will be different. Blander will forever remain Declan's obstacle, and our boy will make Damien transcend the limits of ordinary. Meanwhile, standing beside them, even the professor begins to sweat while looking at the score. He says that Damien is truly worthy of the Blander name, but warns him not to let it go to his head, reminding him that a magician's true mystery is not decided by mana alone. Damien nods with a pleasant smile and then asks our hero if he has measured yet, urging him to check his mana next. Meanwhile, Aster realizes that everyone must be curious how he compares to Damien. He is not from a noble family, yet he hangs around the Blanders and even beat Dolampe's second son. Our protagonist finally steps up but decides to keep to the middle course since it is safest and will create less trouble. Aster tells his name to the assistant professor and slightly adjusts his mana property as he places his hand on the orb, releasing an appropriate amount. However, he suddenly notices that the base threshold set is low, and if that is the case, the measurement will show higher than expected. At first, the meter shows 10, but then suddenly an error occurs, and students are confused about how the threshold was exceeded. Damien shouts that it is amazing, while our hero calmly turns to the assistant professor, saying that the device must have malfunctioned and they will need to remeasure. The professor agrees, but Damien insists that it is correct, saying he can tell. Aster just silently asks him to be quiet. The assistant professor, feeling awkward, resets the orb and asks Aster to try again. This time, the level shown is 3 and the total mana is 15. All the students seem satisfied that it was actually an error, while our protagonist feels relieved that he managed to produce a safer and more careful result, since balancing this is harder than it looks. However, Damien interrupts, calling it all bullshit. When asked where he learned the word, he says that his friend told him things like this are called bullshit. The words make Aster realize that he cannot even talk freely anymore. Soon after, in the first department of magic, Jaira stands near the window, seeing the second department of magic activity proceeding smoothly. Thinking about the attack on Professor Parun, she silently admits Parun was famous back in the day, so he will sort himself out eventually and brush it aside, since it is not her concern. Just then, Yorvi, the assistant professor, arrives with the measurement records and hands them to Jaira. She goes through them and finds Furion's result a little disappointing. Then she reviews Damien's score, acknowledging the greatest talent in the family's history, and admits to herself that he will need close guidance. Finally, she reaches Aster's record and notices the reset caused by the initial error. She reacts sharply upon seeing his name, saying that she will have to keep an eye on him. Later on, Damien forms a dragon and asks our hero how it looks, and Aster confirms that it looks good. They sit at the table and decide that the dragon model they have created will be Lake Blood, Sweat, and Tears number 2. Just then, Chenbi joins them, suggesting they make it a bit more dynamic by spreading the wings and making it appear as if it is about to leap forward with its mouth open. Damien does exactly as he suggests, making Chenbi realize how easily Damien changed it. Even the Great Furion could only manage a spirit body form, while Damien is playing with a mana control test like it is nothing. He silently admits that the world is big, and he is truly just a small fry. Meanwhile, noticing him, our protagonist silently admits he understands how Chenbi must be feeling, but believes the boy has to face reality and move forward. Suddenly, Damien calls out to Aster, saying that today was fun and confessing that he made the right choice coming to the academy. Aster simply smiles softly. Soon after, in his room, our boy sits with Callahan's spectacle pocket, which is locked. However, once one understands the principles of security magic and possesses enough magical sense, they can easily bypass whatever mana pattern the user sets. Aster admits that if he had the right tools, he could have done this in under a week, but since he had to sneak around in the private training room, it took him a full 7 days. Still, he has successfully observed the elixir he received from Blander in mana form, and with that, our hero has also gained a fair amount of useful knowledge here at the academy. Eventually, Aster finally opens the device and sees what is inside. He finds some potions and a cloak that is too big for him to use. Alongside those items lies a defensive artifact. Then, he finally witnesses what he was searching for. Declan's secret grimoire, Red Flame, a laser-type secret spell derived from the blue flame used by Farron. It is a diamond-grade magic that can even burn through force fields, but one needs to reach mastery to actually penetrate them, and that takes time. Suddenly he remembers that today is the midterm performance evaluation. Everyone gathers on the ground shortly after. Damien is excited for the day, while our boy notices the unusually large crowd. Hearing that, Chenbi informs him it is because all the classes from M1 to theirs are gathered, and then shares the rumor that this time's evaluation might be the Canyon Breakthrough. The news prompts our hero to think about the midterm performance evaluation, which consists of 3 types of tests: the trial corridor, a maze-like sewer where one must reach the goal; the Canyon Breakthrough, where students race to the finish line; and the simulator, where one duels against a person or monster. Although to Aster it does not matter what event it is as long as he can pass without making any big trouble, he is fine with it. However, he understands that for Chenbi, the situation is different. Chenbi starts calculating strategies for the Canyon Breakthrough when suddenly someone shouts for everyone to quiet down. Professor Perun appears, introducing himself as the supervising professor of Class M1 in the Magic Department, and declares that he will be overseeing the evaluation. Meanwhile, our hero notices that Perun's dark circles have gotten worse since the last time they met. Professor Perun continues and announces that today's chosen test for the evaluation is the trial corridor. Chenbi instantly loses hope as all his planning falls apart, and he panics. Meanwhile, Perun begins explaining the rules. He states that the trial corridor is a maze-like sewer, and the goal is to pass through it and reach the final gate. No matter which path they take, they will end up at the goal eventually, so there is nothing for the students to worry about. Chenbi finds it easy until Perun reveals that it would be a meaningless race this way. He then summons a figure formed from his mana, introducing them as golems. Hearing that, Chenbi becomes terrified while Professor Perun continues, revealing that although they may be slow and clunky constructs, they are still tough for the students' level. Their cores are exposed and their durability is adjusted, so the students should be able to handle them. But even so, in such a closed space, the golems will be able to catch the students easily. He then starts thinking about how mages truly lack composure, remembering how Paul showed grit by pushing himself to the limit. Yet, he wonders if perhaps the environment is at fault. Even so, there are a few students with potential. He looks at Furion and a few more, and then his eyes land on Damien, as he silently thinks that Damien does not seem to be thinking about anything at all, and assumes he will not pass the test. Breaking out of his thoughts, he explains that the golems will act as gatekeepers at the intersections. Whether they defeat them or avoid them is up to each student. Every participant will also be given a test bracelet, which has protection power similar to a force field. If it breaks, they are disqualified, and the golems will ignore them afterward. After explaining it all, Professor Perun notices how demotivated everyone looks and encourages them to impress him. He adds that he does not care if they reach the goal first or defeat the most opponents. He declares he will personally reward them if they show him something impressive. Standing among the students, Aster reacts sharply at the mention of a reward. Rapitor is the largest library on the eastern continent, divided into 3 tiers: upper, middle, and lower. The tower Aster is permitted to access is the lower tier. When he went to the library to look for clues, he found no trace of the magical volume there. Eventually, if he wants a lead, he will have to search at least the middle tier and above. However, the middle and upper tiers are restricted to royalty, art nobles, and distinguished houses. There is only one way to enter: recommendations from 3 or more professors. In order to get that, our boy needs to earn Professor Perun's reward. Although he is aware that even if he tries to aim for the middle quietly, people would not leave him alone, he brushes it aside, silently declaring that he has already memorized everything about the cross-section diagram. After giving the instructions, Professor Perun grants the students a short preparation time and instructs them to collect supplies from the assistant professor. Soon after, the students begin asking for various items, trying to make things easier or attempting tricks, but the assistant professor refuses all their requests. Meanwhile, watching them, our protagonist cannot help but wonder whether they are midgets or just common ruffians. On the other hand, Damien asks for 20 vine seeds. When the assistant professor reminds him of his primary element, Damien explains that he does not have one, but he can still use plant magic. Meanwhile, Chenbi stands there nervously, prompting Aster to think that even Damien is preparing, and he wonders if Chenbi will be able to break out of his shell with this opportunity. Soon after, they are assigned their starting locations according to their numbers. Our hero steps ahead and checks that his starting point is at 3, while the others are positioned elsewhere. Damien appears excited, while Chenbi wishes them both well for the exam. However, our protagonist notices that the group starting at point 3 consists of around 6 people, none of whom he recognizes. It reminds him of the time he went alone on a troubleshooter mission with a different squad. Suddenly, 3 guys approach, calling out his name, but he does not recognize them because they do not even feel like Class M3 students. The first guy introduces himself as Dulbei and begins proposing a deal. Aster agrees to listen as Dulbei reveals that he will buy the bracelets of those who get eliminated for 30 gold each, excluding our boy and themselves. He offers Aster the job of taking down 3 people and promises to pay 90 gold. Meanwhile, our boy thinks about how 30 gold is about a peasant family's monthly income and wonders why a bracelet is worth that much. Dulbei interrupts and says it is not bad for a rat from the black and white district. He tells him that for now, Aster is protecting himself, but that will not last long, and he should start looking for ways to survive. Aster looks at him awkwardly, silently admitting that he is not completely wrong. Others might call it cowardice or resentment, but Aster believes they are simply making the best use of what they have. However, he still questions why the payment is 90 gold. Dulbei increases it to 35 gold each, totaling 105. But our protagonist says it still does not add up. The group looks confused as our hero explains that there are 3 people and including them, it becomes 6. Dulbei agrees, and our boy asks why he subtracted the young master's life from the prize. Since Aster raised it to 35 each, that makes 210 gold, which is the correct count. This frustrates Dulbei, who silently wonders if our boy does not know his place. Eventually, he raises it to 40 gold. Hearing this, Aster smiles, commenting that makes it 240. Dulbei assumes that Aster is greedy and trying to profit from the situation, thinking he does not even understand that greed might lead him to trouble. He wonders if a barbarian can foresee such consequences and considers it a waste of time. He believes that to carry out the lady's orders, there is no better hunting dog than our boy. However, since he considers him mad, they will find another method, and Dulbei walks away, ending the negotiation. Suddenly, Aster interrupts from behind, explaining that regardless of anything else, Dulbei will still owe him for the bracelets. Dulbei turns back, annoyed, while our protagonist explains that if they load 3 packs and 3 people into a carriage and then remove the packs, they should still pay for the people. He demands 120 gold. Hearing that, one of Dulbei's friends becomes furious and mocks our boy, cursing him and declaring that Dulbei is not the same as him and that his district once held the title of Baron. From behind, Dulbei tries to stop him, but his friend continues, pushing Dulbei to shout at him not to make him spit on his face any longer. He finally agrees to pay 120 gold, silently admitting that the young lady's order takes priority and that if they earn her favor, his merchant guild could expand significantly. However, Aster cannot overlook such a noble person, so he raises the price again, claiming that since they are nobles, the amount must double, 160 gold coins. Dulbei agrees and hands over the coins, declaring that from this moment on, he will show our hero how hard life can become for 160 gold pieces. Soon after, Professor Perun explains that the field barrier activates against spells that directly strike the body or attacks imbued with mana. If the barrier is destroyed, the bracelet stays where it is, and the wearer is forcibly removed from the test. He assures them not to worry about injuries. Then Professor Perun starts the test. They first complete the wrap, then show interior footage, and finally begin grading. Meanwhile, sitting behind, Professor Perun notices that Dahlia and Damien share the same starting point. Before he can think further, the screen suddenly begins to flicker and lag. The assistant professors begin chattering in confusion, wondering what is happening, while Perun asks them to stop and check the magic eye, asking which starting point it is. The assistant professor reports that it is starting point 3. As soon as the wrap completes, Dulbei snaps his fingers, and a beam of light scatters across the wall. He declares that from now on, he is going to be trouble for everyone, and, noting they are short on time, he urges his group to begin. Immediately, Dulbei and 2 of his friends launch their magic against Aster. However, our boy stands firm for a while, until the realization hits that getting hit by magic means instant disqualification and forced transfer. Therefore, he has no choice but to dodge and strike back. Our protagonist jumps through the wall and rushes straight at them. He strikes but pulls back his mana right before impact to avoid disqualification. He then starts beating them all one by one, calling the process orderly satisfied. He punches and kicks them repeatedly, eventually knocking them down until they collapse on the ground. Afterward, he mockingly remarks how he managed to beat everyone already, prompting Dulbei to raise the price to 320 gold for the insolence, while our hero offers 1 silver per hit in return. Soon after, Dulbei shouts, his face swollen from the beating, and questions if Aster is going to pay for all this. Instantly, our protagonist hits him again, telling him to get lost. He then starts calculating that according to 100 hits, that is 10 gold deducted. He admits that without Damien around, keeping his power in check was tough. Eventually, he realizes he must make sure the roles of victim and aggressor do not switch, so he maintains his position as the victim. Aster has now successfully secured the 6 bracelets. He thinks about how he needs 3 recommendations in total, meaning he will need 2 more people to claim Perun's reward. In the end, he will have to get another professor to personally vouch for him. He sits there, wondering what kind of impression he should make. Looking at the corridors, our hero considers whether he should destroy them, noting that there are only 4 pillars holding up the ground. But eventually, he brushes off the idea, since he would make an enemy of the entire eastern continent that way. So, he decides not to think too much and just keeps moving on his own. As he starts to walk, Aster wonders how the others are doing. Meanwhile, elsewhere, some other students are struggling and questioning how the situation is even possible. In front of them stands Damien, controlling the golems with vine seeds and not letting anyone pass through. In another area, Chenbi confesses that he is only here to pass the exam, shouting for others to stop attacking him as he hides behind a pillar. 2 girls stand nearby, exhausted, as one asks the other to go and catch Chenbi. However, she refuses, doubting her friend's intentions. As they begin to argue, Chenbi finds a chance to run off, thinking that aiming high is a luxury for someone like him, and that he only needs to pass the exam. He rushes forward when suddenly he notices the bracelet he is wearing is surrounded by red energy. Confused, he wonders what is happening and eventually realizes he might have been hit by magic without noticing and is already disqualified. He twists into a corner, thinking he will be transferred soon, but nothing happens. Just then, a voice calls out and greets them all, calling them refined schoolers of the academy. Chenbi realizes that the voice does not belong to the academy. The voice continues, saying that everyone may wonder who they are, but some might have already guessed and should know why this is happening. They declare to those who suspect their identity that they have no demands, only the consequence of angering a great being. Suddenly, they announce that every student will die right here and there is no way out. Even Damien notices the voice. Meanwhile, outside, the assistant professor freaks out, questioning who it is, especially since even the magic IR is offline. Sitting behind them, Professor Perun asks the staff not to panic and tells them to fetch the professors, specifically Professor Felina, demanding they bring her faster than anyone. The assisting teacher rushes around doing as told, while Professor Perun sits back in his chair, anger flickering in his eyes as he curses someone. Meanwhile, back inside, our protagonist has already destroyed a golem as another starts to emerge. Feeling frustrated, Aster wonders what is going on. Aster fights the golems one by one, striking them down with calculated precision. However, he soon notices that the constructs, which should be moving slowly and stiffly, are instead fast and nimble. A strange voice continues to echo through the testing ground as 10 minutes pass. On top of that, the golems are pinpointing exactly where Aster is and rushing straight at him. He realizes that if these gatekeeper-type golems are moving autonomously, someone has tampered with the control system. Since there are too many of them, it is clear that every unit in storage has been released. Even so, our protagonist remains confident in himself, thinking that he is someone who has experienced everything except aerial combat. He rushes forward as magical orbs form in his hands, declaring that no matter who they are, he will beat them all. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Chenbi is nervous and exhausted from walking. He admits that if he had known this would happen, he would have dropped out early, fearing he might die in these corridors. Just then, he notices someone running toward him. It is our hero, but behind him rush countless golems. Witnessing them, Chenbi is terrified as Aster pats him on the shoulder and tells him to run. Silently, Aster thinks about how he was simply sensing mana and came running this way, assuming it was Damien he had detected. He also realizes that with the way Chenbi is running, the boy will eventually be caught. Consequently, Aster decides to use Plan B and demands Chenbi hand over his bracelet. He explains that the golem's natural detection range is not wide enough for them to chase so precisely. Therefore, the bracelet must be linked to the tampered control system, acting as a beacon. Hearing this, Chenbi takes off the bracelet but becomes worried about our hero. Aster reveals that since he has already been marked as a target, pulling the golems toward himself gives Chenbi the highest survival chance. He tells Chenbi to run, promising to buy time and find Damien. He also reminds Chenbi that he has a family and must survive no matter what. These words remind Chenbi of his family, who always encouraged him. He finally hands over the bracelet, asking Aster to survive and meet them again as soon as possible. Aster takes it with a smile while Chenbi runs back, admitting that he has no choice but to live. His parents, who bought him a spellbook instead of food, and his younger sister, who quit school because of him, all deserve a better life. He remembers his mother's words calling him a proud son, but suddenly he doubts himself, questioning if he is really someone to be proud of. He considers himself indecisive, timid, and nothing special. The realization hits Chenbi that he has even abandoned a friend. Refusing to add another guilt to his heart, he decides to never give up and uses the best magic he knows, the spell his teacher left him, the one who awakened his talent. He desperately tries to use the power of Earth. Suddenly, insane energy scatters forward as Chenbi shouts for our protagonist to watch out. The energy strikes straight at the enemy. Our hero recognizes the spell as magic, that not only reshapes the rock forming the trial corridor, but alters its quality as well. As a result, the ground and the enemies are completely ruined. Aster is shocked, thinking that changing two properties is extremely difficult and that this is not a spell Chenbi should be able to maintain. Suddenly, Chenbi collapses. Aster catches him as Chenbi reveals that it is a spell his master left behind called Spar of Earth. He finds the name grand, but our hero disagrees, though he adds that it is still impressive. He tells the boy that with a spell like this, it is the caster who proves its worth. Whether it is grand or not depends entirely on how the user employs it. Meanwhile, a bloodied Chenbi calls out our boy's name. Aster brings out a potion and makes him drink it. Chenbi recovers quickly, while Aster wonders whether he should drag the boy along or leave him there. Eventually, he decides and uses his mana flow to map the area. After figuring things out, he tells Chenbi to go straight, informing him that he will reach the other students at the fork. When Chenbi asks about him, our hero does not answer directly. Instead, he senses the mana flowing toward the control room and finds it strange. It feels familiar, yet Aster is sure that it is not Declan's method. He simply declares that he has something to do, and silently decides to go check it out. Running towards the control room, Aster tries to remember where he felt this mana before because somehow it doesn't feel like it belongs to Declan. The moment our hero reaches the room, his eyes widen in shock as he finds a demonic realm in front of him. As a creepy smile takes over his face, our protagonist finally realizes why he feels the familiarity. He has faced this presence before. Looking inside the realm, Aster also finds the cursed beings lying within, leading him to think that they have even recreated those cursed beings who terrorized the continent centuries ago. To him, it seems like they always choose the worst possible things to do. As an even creepier smile takes over, Aster calls out Frizen's name because he is sure that he is behind it, calling him a rat bastard. Meanwhile, inside the inner control room of the trials corridor, a man is standing and laughing at his victory in successfully creating the demonic realm. It is actually Frizen, who now thinks that everything about the realm is quite perfect due to the ancient artifact, a magical glove, that he is wearing. With the spatial severing function of the artifact, he was able to enter it without being harmed, and the demonic energy erosion function helped him take control over the room. It even helped him create a demonic realm about which Frizen is clearly excited. At this moment, a man appears from the shadows, asking Frizen whether he succeeded or did something he wasn't supposed to do. Frizen, with a smile, states that the creation of the demonic energy completes the contract between them. Moreover, it will be enough to ruin that professor's reputation until his downfall becomes inevitable. The man appearing from the shadows is completely visible now, who is actually the mighty hound of House Weimar. He states he doesn't care about what method Frizen chooses, because all he wants is to ruin the Xenian Academy along with the professor whom they are protecting. Showing his respect, Frizen agrees to go according to the order while calling the man by his family name, which is House Weimar. Hearing this, the man suggests Frizen should not say the name from his filthy mouth unless he wants death. As Frizen is still bending in front of him, he thinks to himself that the man is just from a vassal family under Declan. He is still so full of pride, but right now Frizen is thinking to endure him because he wants a place for experimentation, which Weimar will provide upon the completion of this contract between them. Moreover, he is also getting excited about the demonic realm which he created just a while ago. It is a forbidden magic sect, Salvatium, so Frizen seems quite excited about it. Finding a student coming towards them, Weimar asks about how much time Frizen requires to completely control the system. Hearing this, Frizen gets excited and calls that student their first test subject, which appears confusing to Weimar, so he inquires about it. To make him understand, Frizen questions him in return if he wants to see what the demonic energy of such a high level can do to a person. Answering immediately, Weimar claims people become crazy or die immediately due to the exposure. Though this theory is commonly known amongst everyone, Frizen with a creepy smile explains that, according to ancient texts, the demonic realm with mana and ether is different. It results in human beautification, turning humans into insane and mad beasts. Standing in front of the screen and looking at our boy, who is standing in front of the realm with demonic beasts while golems are chasing him from behind, Frizen wonders if he will enter the realm or not, because that's what he wants Aster to do. With shock on his face, Aster is standing in front of the realm, but suddenly he lets out a quirky smirk and whispers while making signs with his mouth. Our hero challenges Friesen to wait for him. Hearing this, Friesen becomes too stunned to speak while Weimar questions if he is familiar with that boy. Since Friesen has never seen him before, he denies it, but he is getting scared about the fact that the student knows his name. At this moment, Aster takes out the test bracelet, which makes Friesen even more scared and shocked. Moving forward, our boy runs towards the demons and puts the test bracelet on each of them. Later on, Aster orders them to kill each other. Hearing this, Friesen speaks in pain, but then he realizes Aster is coming towards them pretty fast. He is trying to make his demonic monsters stop our hero, but it's too late to do anything now. Breaking through the walls, Aster appears in front of them and greets Friesen, saying it's been a long time since they last met each other. On the other hand, Chenbi has found Damien too, who is fighting with the golems, but Chenbi is rather confused seeing how he is controlling them without any difficulty. As Chenbi is still trying to figure things out, Dahlia questions him how he got here. Instead of answering, he finds all of them are still wearing the bracelets, so he suggests they should throw them out because they are the reason why golems are finding them. But then Eveline appears on the scene, thinking he is lying. Furthermore, she thinks he just wants to take their bracelets too. Chenbi cannot believe that she is suspecting him. As Eveline puts false allegations on him, Chenbi claims there are things more important than these bracelets, and also explains that these bracelets work like a tracking system, being linked to the control system. Eveline questions how he found it out, so Chenbi states it was Aster who told him about it. However, as he is about to say something else, Eveline interrupts him. She claims he got deceived by someone and lost his bracelet, and now he is trying to deceive them too so he doesn't fail the exam. Calling our boy a vagrant, she further states that Chenbi got deceived by him even after paying attention in class. Remembering how Aster helped him earlier, Chenbi gets quite furious thinking she knows nothing about him, and he is about to speak when Damien speaks up. Walking towards them and taking out his bracelet, Damien claims that when he first met Aster, he questioned him about what he had at that time. Without any pause, our protagonist answered that he had a friend. So now Damien is also going to trust his friend, Aster. At the same moment, Damien throws away his bracelet, claiming he doesn't need it so they can take it if that is all they want. While walking away from them, Damien asks Chenbi to come along. Looking at his act, Chenbi wonders if he is really Damien, because the old Damien wouldn't have done anything like this. Meanwhile, Aster, who is standing in front of Friesen, claims he once went inside the demonic realm to kill him, but who knew that they would meet like this? Although Friesen can't understand him, in fear he asks the Hound Weimar to protect him. Weimar questions if this is really their first meeting, and Friesen answers in the affirmative. After becoming sure, the Hound Weimar begins to approach our boy because his job is to protect Friesen. For this, he is going to kill Aster without leaving any trace behind. Looking at him, Aster thinks to himself that the man is from a vassal family under Declan with secret wind magic. It is a prestigious house, famous for its speed and power. Moreover, this hound is actually the cast-off child whom the Weimar family has been raising separately. He is someone who acts like a real hunting dog for his owner. Moving on, Aster asks the reason behind him being with Friesen since he finds it suspicious. Instead of answering, the Hound questions in return if our boy knows his identity. In a fit of anger, Aster yells that he was the one who first questioned him. Still shouting, our protagonist repeats his question, so Weimar's Hound wonders if he is trying to seek death by doing this. Instead of answering, he again questions Aster, which makes Aster even more furious. With a loud voice, our hero repeats his question a third time and orders him to give an answer. Hearing this, the Hound becomes angry too and attacks our boy. While dodging the attacks and running towards him, Aster repeats his question again and again, calling him a Weimar Hound and calling Friesen a rat bastard. Running towards the Hound, Aster is sure to win against him with his magical weapon and speed. Actually, Aster was repeating his question again and again because the Hound was raised like a real dog. Since our boy has raised dogs too, he knows that dogs get anxious after hearing the same thing repeatedly. The Hound gets angry as he realizes Aster is treating him like a dog and finds it humiliating. Meanwhile, our protagonist claims this is the reality and calls him Declan's dog. On the other hand, Friesen is shouting at the Hound, asking him to beat our hero. At this moment, Aster makes his final move, and using the collision magic, he kills the Weimar's Hound at once. After that, he challenges Friesen since it is just the two of them now, while Friesen is just standing there in complete shock at the Hound's death. Moving on, Friesen takes out his weapon and is about to attack our boy, but Aster throws the dead Hound's weapon towards him and cuts the arm in which Friesen was holding the weapon. Seeing this, Friesen yells in pain while crying over the lost arm. Terrified and fearful, he pleads with Aster not to come closer to him. Looking behind at the magic globe, he remembers the demonic realm which he just created. Therefore, he challenges our boy not to kill him because, if he dies, he won't be able to stop the realm. Moreover, he claims Aster's other friends will also get stuck in it. Without caring about the threat, Aster asks him to go further, which appears even more shocking to Friesen. Furthermore, Aster states he can wait until the demonic realm takes over everyone, and after that, he will teach Friesen the lesson he deserves. Meanwhile, Friesen is just staring at our hero with pure fear in his eyes. Blood is dripping out of Friesen's shoulder while he wonders. This demonic realm should really devour his friends, and he should feel fearful, but the stillness of Aster is more terrifying. Looking at his igniting eyes with no mercy in them, a question echoes in Friesen's mind. Is our boy actually human? To scare our protagonist, Friesen repeats that he is the only one who can stop this demonic realm within the 5 minutes remaining before its completion. Aster interrupts him, coldly stating he knows that all his friends will die. As anxiety takes over, Friesen walks towards Aster and yells, demanding to know why he isn't doing anything when he knows what can actually happen. In his dilemma, Aster suddenly holds Friesen's other arm and twists it with immense force. Yelling in pain, Friesen doesn't realize that the artifact is no longer in his hand. By the time he realizes the loss, it is already too late. Our hero is wearing it, claiming he isn't the only one who can use such a tool. As Friesen stands back in fear, our protagonist, guided by his past memories, puts his hand on the controller. Friesen cannot believe that Aster is actually controlling the system himself. Meanwhile, our hero begins telling Friesen that he can never forget him, since he is the one who taught forbidden magic to the young master in their past life. Since only Friesen and the young master knew this magic, Friesen was the only one who had to be killed. Aster knew that Decolan would eventually kill the man, which is why Aster himself went out to hunt him before Decolan could. Our boy claims that after looking for him for a long time, he nearly went insane. He states he was full of pride, believing he could catch anyone across the continent, but finding Friesen seemed like an impossible task. Aster searched every possible place but could not find him, soaking his hands in blood during the search. Finally, he found the demonic realm and was about to locate his target, but the demonic beasts took over. Later on, our hero began to lose his sanity due to the demonic energy. After trying everything, he finally gave up and exited the realm, only to find a troubleshooter waiting outside because he was too scared to go inside. That shooter told Aster that Decolan had already killed Friesen after extracting all the information about the forbidden magic and the artifact. As Aster continues describing how he sat in front of the realm for days, Friesen falls to his knees on the floor because he is continuously losing blood. Friesen claims with a trembling voice that he never taught anything to a young master of any family, so he doesn't understand any of this. Looking at him dying without hearing the story, our boy takes out a healing potion and gives it to Friesen. Apparently, Aster wants him to hear the full story, while Friesen is now thinking only of finding a way to run away and survive. Continuing his story, our hero looks upward and states that while sitting there, he once saw a wyvern in the sky. It was flying freely while our protagonist found himself pathetic in comparison. At that moment, his revenge for his friends turned into emotional venting, and he gave up on the idea of vengeance. As Friesen attempts to run away, Aster dashes towards him and pushes his face into the ground. Aster claims that he finally found him today. Just for this day, our hero had been going through all the information Friesen left behind about the demonic realm, forbidden magic, and the disgusting artifact again and again. As Friesen groans in pain, Aster continues, stating that he studied the death of his comrades as well. At this moment, our hero picks up the hound's dagger and yells that he has enough time to make Friesen go through every suffering his comrades faced in the past, one by one. Friesen cries tears of fear as he faces his death. On the other hand, the professors have finally found a way out and are running around to locate the students. Professor Felina realizes they have lost 2 hours due to the magic and must hurry before anyone dies. Amidst her thoughts, an assistant shows her the magic eye and reports it has been restored. Taking it, she orders everyone to find the students first, either by the magic eye or by themselves, and further orders them not to broadcast anything. She does this because they don't know how the intruders might act. After looking for a while, they find the students alive and safe, which seems suspicious to Professor Felina. She cannot believe that intruders controlled the gate for 2 hours yet killed no one. In this instance, Professor Faroon, who is in the control room, asks her to look through the magic eye. The moment Professor Felina looks at the screen, her eyes widen in disgust at the gruesome scene. Meanwhile, Professor Faroon explains that there were 2 intruders who were killed miserably. Professor Felina thinks to herself that she has never come across anything like this and wonders who is responsible. A picture of Aster appears in her mind, recalling when she first received his application letter. Although he is a vagabond from the black and white zone, he applied under the Blando family. At that time, his magic powers showed an error reading on the application, which seemed suspicious to her, and an assistant professor suggested watching him closely. As she looks behind her, our boy is already standing there with the other students. At that moment, a man appears, apologizing for being late. Everyone addresses him as the principal, but he corrects them, saying they can call him the headmaster instead. Professor Felina accepts his apology since he traveled from the outer east continent. The headmaster appreciates the professor for handling everything, noting she proved his trust was well placed. As the image of Aster appears before him, he questions Professor Felina, asking if our protagonist is the one who killed the intruders and did this. At night, the rain is pouring all over the place while our hero is sitting and meditating in an abandoned shrine. He thinks about the heart demon which every mage possesses. It appears without any warning and ends up ruining things most of the time. Aster also reflects on how he didn't have it in his last life because, being a troubleshooter, he just did what he was ordered and never really mourned his comrades' deaths, instead taking it as fate. The soul of his anger and rage is his death by forbidden magic. Although he thought that he had moved beyond these emotions, it now seems like they are turning into the seed of a heart demon. Getting angry at the thought, Aster thinks he is hugging a ticking bomb that can explode anywhere. As he stands up, he questions himself about his identity. Though he is a former troubleshooter, he thinks of himself as someone else too, and feels like this tension is actually good for him. Since a week has passed after the coffin of the trials incident, Aster thinks today is his opportunity since his condition is quite perfect. He takes out a book, which is the secret art of the red flower, Jokwa, and prepares to defeat his enemy. In his previous life, our protagonist learned non-elemental techniques since he was a troubleshooter, but today he is going to learn the red flower, which is an elemental secret art. Running through the pages of the book, our hero finds he has already entered the first stage, yet he intends to check the technique until the end. After reading the entire book, Aster begins thinking of his own ways to adapt the style. He believes he can circulate mana through the red flower circuit since the mana circuits are quite similar to the Heaven's Source art, which can result in fire mana. As he starts the meditation again, our protagonist is certain he can create the imagery. All he wants is a burning flame and nothing else. Apparently, Aster is trying to create something that won't necessarily use oxygen, a fire that can burn even without it. The fire that was kept in his heart for a long time finally manifests into real fire. As our boy finally succeeds in creating the flames, he realizes it is way more powerful and destructive than his usual mana usage. Although the compression is within a limit, its repulsive force is rather strong, so he thinks of using the collision formula for the time being, even if it feels rather shameful for Aster. Moving on, Aster encourages himself since he is getting closer to his enemy. Furthermore, after adding the fire attribute to the basic art, he requires some useful magic to pair with it. Our hero is sure that any spell can work with it since fire-type magic doesn't rely much on specific forms. At this moment, Aster feels someone standing on the other side of the exit, so he walks there and opens the door. It is the principal who is standing in front of the door, and the man appreciates Professor Felina in his mind the moment Aster appears in front of him. Moving forward, the principal praises our boy for handling the fire mana alone. Aster addresses him as the president, but the man corrects him, saying that he can call him principal instead. As the principal is about to say something, he begins to use magic instead, causing the pressure in the air to increase. Although our protagonist can't understand why everyone does this upon meeting him, he asks himself the same question: who is he? He answers himself that since he is a former troubleshooter, he can break but he won't bend, which is his conviction. Amidst these thoughts, the principal questions why he isn't greeting him, considering he is the highest ranker in the entire academy. The moment our boy hears it, he immediately bends and calls him Mr. President, but then corrects himself and addresses him again as Mr. Principal. Actually, Aster is shouting the name. Aster changes his conviction here, deciding that the waist exists so that one can bend. The principal orders our protagonist to lower his voice, though he praises him again. While still bending, Aster again shouts to apologize for his mistake. Seeing this, the principal suggests that no one will come here after hearing him since he has already blocked off the surroundings. This was actually Aster's plan to gather people, leading the man to call him a quick-witted bastard. As the principal sits on the ground, our hero questions the reason behind him being here. The principal answers that he was curious about something, though he doesn't think Aster will answer correctly. Moving on, he orders Aster to sit on the floor. Aster's body simply follows the orders due to the high mana of the principal. Since our hero's body is forcefully bending, the floor breaks into several pieces. Meanwhile, the principal claims that Aster is hiding something according to Professor Felina and explains he just wants to know the truth. As the rainwater drips from his face, Aster thinks the man is a monster, and not at all like the principal who was stuttering during the speech. But again, compared to his real enemy, this man is far less than a monster. Therefore, our boy tries to fight against the repulsive force using the interference formula and succeeds. Once Aster is back in control, he questions the principal whether this is about the coffin of trials. Aster agrees with the fact that he killed the intruders. The principal can't believe that he is just telling the truth like this, but Aster thinks it isn't a secret worth hiding. Although he didn't necessarily want it to get out, it wasn't important either way. Moving on, our boy asks if he has any other questions. As both pass deadly glances to each other, our protagonist thinks of raising a wyvern instead of eating it so he can get help in his time of need. Meanwhile, the principal bangs his hand on his head and begins to laugh. Our hero calls him a rare kind of lunatic, seeing the way he is altering his moods. After that, The principal praises him for the look in his eyes earlier and claims that he will now ask questions which Aster can answer easily. After that, he again asks our boy to sit down, to which he agrees. As both are sitting on their knees in front of each other, Aster finds the atmosphere different from earlier. The principal gives him the feeling of a war mage, but our protagonist can't comprehend whether it's his appearance, the atmosphere, or perhaps his true nature. As the principal is about to ask his first question, Aster interrupts him, asking whether he knew the wyvern that became a meal. This leaves the principal in shock, but our hero begs him to continue. Here the principal calls him a junior, to which our boy claims they have a teacher-student relationship. The principal yells at him, claiming that on the battlefield they are senior and junior to each other. Although Aster can't understand what he is saying, he obeys since the man is stronger and calls him senior. Continuing the conversation and addressing Aster as a junior, the principal questions what terrible thing the intruders did that made Aster kill them like that, all while our boy stares back into the man's war mage eyes. The moment the headmaster questions our boy, Aster answers with another question about what he would have done instead. The headmaster answers that, instead, they would crush them under their foot and will plead with the majesty to let them gather their old comrades too. The moment our protagonist hears this, he understands that the man is referring to war mages and knights as old comrades who would definitely be strong forces. After thinking for a while, Aster speaks up and suggests that the headmaster is referring to Declan. Moving on, the headmaster questions if he is familiar with that mage who got eaten by the wyvern. Pondering upon it for a few seconds, our hero answers in the negative. The headmaster feels a bit of arrogance in his answer since he also doesn't know that mage and wonders if Aster is actually that one. Hearing it, our boy can't believe the headmaster can go this deep because he wanted to put all the blame on Declan. Being left with no choice, Aster finally tells the truth that the person who got killed is Weimar, so the headmaster asks for details about both the intruders. To clarify, Aster begins explaining that one is Weimar and the other one is Friesen, a Magitech engineer. But the principal is not believing him and asks for solid evidence. Out of annoyance, our hero questions if he can't understand such a basic thing too. The principal can feel the arrogance in him, but ignoring it, he questions how Aster knows them. The next moment, Aster begins to tell everything to the principal. After telling everything he can, our boy becomes silent while the principal is also thinking silently. Looking at him, Aster thinks to himself that he tried his best to answer everything, and by looking at the principal's face, he can see visible anger. The principal finally speaks up and questions if he knows that mage who got eaten by a goblin and also repeats that he can feel arrogance in his voice. Anxious and scared, our hero answers with a smile that they're having some kind of misunderstanding between them. But the principal asks him to stop smiling with his rotten goblin eyes. In answer, Aster immediately closes his eyes. Pondering on that conversation they just had, the principal questions if he really wants to build a library as tall as the tower, and also praises him. Later on, the principal also states that he can fill an entire wall of shelves on the top floor, so our boy thanks him for that. Meanwhile, our protagonist also thinks to himself how the world runs on connections instead of merits. After that, the principal states another thing, that our hero will be granted an admission ticket too, with which he can enter the library. In return, the principal asks him for a favor. The principal asks our boy to open his eyes properly, while Aster shows his desire to know about the favor he wants. The principal answers that they'll talk about the favor later, and begins to explain about the artifact which, although dangerous, has some advantages too. For example, it can help our hero to build his tower with the spatial severance. Hearing this, Aster finally remembers that with spatial severance, all the teleportation magic circles were blocked during the trials. Even the professors weren't able to break it, so Aster is thinking of using it as a defense, but then our boy realizes a problem. He talks about it with the principal, explaining that he is unfamiliar with Magitech. The principal recommends Professor Felina to him since she's a trustworthy person, but it will be difficult to make her accept him since they're unaware of his true identity. Therefore, the principal suggests a plan to him which makes Aster quite shocked. The very next day, as Aster is sitting alone, sipping on his tea and reading a book, Damien and Chenby appear in the scene. As their mouths are filled with cake, they greet our hero with a smile, and both appear a bit fat. Looking at them like this, out of curiosity and shock, Aster questions how they turned like this. Chenby lets out an embarrassing laugh, and, as he is about to say something, a student interrupts him and offers Chenby to do the magic training together. In answer, he agrees without any hesitation. Another student waves at Damien and thanks him for his help at the trial. Thus, Damien waves back at him. Apparently, Damien and Chenby have gotten the spotlight due to that bracelet information which they told the other students during the trials, which initially came from our boy, so now Chenby thanks him for that. Due to that, not only the students, but their parents also helped his family. Putting his purple cover book on the table, Aster claims there's no need to thank him. Since Chenbi can't understand it, Aster explains that all the credits go to Chenbi since he did everything to make other students understand him. Once our hero is done praising him, he asks about Damien, who is standing a bit away from them, along with some other students. Chenbi answers that he caught a plant-type golem named Cerberus. Our boy can't believe that he actually controlled a golem and also praises him in his mind. Later on, Chenbi sits on the chair next to Aster since they're meeting after a week now. But then someone appears behind Aster, which leaves Chenbi in shock. As our hero turns his head, he finds Professor Felina standing there, who then claims that she wants to talk with him. The scene shifts to her office where our boy and Professor Felina are sitting next to each other. Aster is looking the other way while the professor questions if he knows the reason behind him being here. Aster answers that one thing he's sure about is that this meeting isn't regarding counseling. Agreeing with him, Felina begins to explain that it is about him being the descendant of an old war mage, and also questions if Weimar was behind the last incident. Our protagonist calls him trash, so Professor Felina agrees with him, and even adds that everyone attached to Declan is trash. This was actually the principal's plan to introduce Aster as a descendant. It is because the headmaster also dislikes Weimar and Declan, so this plan was perfect to continue. Now Professor Felina, though suspicious, agrees to teach our boy. Later on, Professor Felina is about to say something but stops, and it also seems like she's blushing. Further, she claims that she can cover everything for now since he doesn't seem like a threat. At this moment, Aster interrupts her, saying they have a huge age gap between them with a relationship between a student and a teacher, so anything between them won't be possible. It seems like Aster got the wrong idea. Though blushing, Professor Felina lets out, "What the fuck?" out of her mouth in shock. Since Professor Felina is about to do something opposite to her true nature, the words simply won't come out, leading Aster to get the wrong idea that she is trying to start a romance with him. Gathering up her courage, she finally thanks our boy for protecting both the students and the trial corridor, which leaves our hero in a state of total shock. Once he realizes what Felina was actually trying to say, Aster invites her to continue, and the professor tells him to carry on. There is a moment of silence between them before Aster finally speaks about his goal of creating a library for everyone. Though hesitant, he asks if she can support him by providing a few of her publications to his collection. Professor Felina agrees to his proposal but also asks him to move to the main point regarding the ancient artifact. She orders Aster to research the device, noting that while they can destroy it in the worst-case scenario, the real problem is the forbidden magic cabal, Salvatium, who will likely misuse it. Our hero repeats the word but mispronounces it as Silver Town. Hearing this, Felina gets furious. She corrects him but warns that she will tear off our boy's ears if he does it again. She then explains that Salvatium is a union of all forbidden magic masters. Although none of them work together, their collective goal is to create a demonic realm. Talking about Friesen, she explains that he was the one who gave life to their dream, and since Aster killed him, others will definitely come looking for the artifact. Felina explains that they are strong enough to fight against Declan. Therefore, even if our protagonist is powerful, fighting the Cabal could cause his death. Hearing about his potential demise, Aster lets out a smile, knowing that he is going to fight them regardless, because he is confident in his ability to defeat them. Passing a quirky smirk to Felina, our boy agrees with her. Looking at him, she returns the smile, but cannot understand why Aster is smiling in such a situation. Taking the artifact out of his portal, Aster asks her to conduct research on it, and Felina agrees without hesitation. Amidst their conversation, an assistant rushes the door open and reports, with clear fear in his voice and face, that the head of Declan has just arrived at the academy. This news leaves our protagonist in shock as well. Meanwhile, outside, people are rushing to strengthen defenses and send students back to their dormitories because Declan is reaching the academy in his carriage. The headmaster, Professor Felina, and Professor Faroon wait for him outside. As the horses stop in front of them, the headmaster recognizes the man sitting in front as the new head of Declan, Farron, who attained his position at age 30 and received the title of Archmage. One thing about the atrocities of Declan is that they become worse once a member becomes the head. The headmaster reflects on the fact that, under the teachings of the founding headmaster, no one is treated as special. Even royals have to walk and dirty their shoes in the academy. However, the new head proudly refuses to step on the ground. Moreover, he works as a coachman, but moves around the academy on a horse against tradition. Yet no one can say anything, leading the headmaster to think he is quite sharp. Looking at them, the head of Declan questions if he has arrived before the set time. Confused, the headmaster asks what he is trying to say. Farron answers with another question, mentioning he heard the trial corridor was seized by intruders. Hearing this, the headmaster gets furious and wonders if the man came here just to annoy him or investigate him. The headmaster thinks to himself that although not everyone knows the reality that Declan was behind this, he still cannot understand the reason for this visit. Moving on, Farron claims he is here to help and has caught the vermin. As he shows them Weimar's face through magic, he claims that he has brought the head along with the direct and collateral lines, asking if they are satisfied. Aster, who is keeping his eyes on them from a distance, finally realizes that Farron took Weimar's head. Thinking of his previous life, our boy expected him to do something like this since the man killed his own bloodline for the sake of Declan. Moreover, Aster thinks that things are going his way because he only told the headmaster about Declan and Weimar earlier, and now Farron has appeared on the scene. Although Aster cannot understand if he is simply lucky, he remembers that in his previous life, he was far behind Farron and unable to understand him. Now, the man seems like a massive mountain to climb. Aster, raising his hand and positioning it near Farron's neck in the air, claims he is confident enough to reach him in this life. Aster then closes his fist while his eyes sharpen with confidence. Several days have now passed, and a lot of activities are going on around the academy. The day when Farron came to the academy, he also announced the arrival of a direct descendant of Declan's blood at the academy as an undergraduate. Apparently, it is a powerful card, simply a hostage, which only a prestigious family can play. Moreover, the Imperial side also announced the third princess's enrollment, so no one knows whether it was their plan or just a coincidence. Aster is keeping these thoughts away since they will only enroll next year, and right now they are having the Pistonike Festival. Apparently, this is a victory celebration for the students who were once mobilized during the Age of War. Since it was arranged for them after the trial incident, our hero thinks the academy is treating this incident like that one, which is rather good to cheer up the students. Moreover, alcohol is also available at this festival, which shows that the academy is actually treating it like the Pistonike Festival. Everyone is allowed to drink openly except those who are on duty, though they are drinking too while hiding. At one place, people are having a drinking competition in which a person is winning again and again, so Damien challenges to go against him while Chenbi yells in shock. When everyone is busy with their activities, they hear the announcement about the award ceremony and are asked to gather at the Sage Hall to attend it. Our protagonist drags Damien from the drinking contest, thinking that they deserve a reward too. With a grin on his face, Aster is going to collect it. In the hall, the headmaster gave a speech for a while, and then it proceeded towards the award ceremony. Later on, he asks all the students to come on the podium whose names he is going to call. The names are Dahlia, Damien, Eveline, Chenbi, and Aster. Looking at Eveline, who is the daughter of the Golden Trading Company, our hero thinks there is something suspicious about her. Also, he doesn't remember her from his previous life, but due to the testimonies, he has no other option but to take her as a contributor too. Now they are going to receive awards which are top-grade elixir. Walking towards Aster, the headmaster shows his deepest appreciation towards him. Talking through telepathy, our boy questions if he can return it since it is more like trash, so the headmaster answers if Aster puts it in the incinerator, he will put him in there too. Hearing it, Aster thinks to himself that he can just burn it without anyone knowing. After the award ceremony, Aster spends his day enjoying the festival with Damien and Chenbi. Our hero thinks they deserve it since they have been going around. At night, the academy also arranged the fireworks, about which Aster thinks it is a waste of money. But still, he feels like it is quite amazing. Looking at the sky, he begins to dream about his tower where he dreams to go to the highest floor and look at the ground. After making the tower, Aster also dreams of holding such a festival which will last for a week and will also hold a sage ascension ceremony at last. It would be a festival about him as a great sage while riding on a wyvern. He is thinking of a white one. Aster spends his night in that dream, and upon waking, he finds a white owl on his window. As he reads the message which was tied on the owl, it was from the headmaster. Apparently, he is asking Aster to meet him. Standing on his window, our boy takes a high jump along with the owl. After some time, he is standing in front of the high building which was once used by troubleshooters, centuries ago. Opening the door, he addresses the headmaster as senior while the owl flies away from his head. Looking around the room, our hero says that he should call it an office. The headmaster answers that, though he wants to, he cannot help it due to traditions. Moving on, the headmaster offers tea to our boy, which seems quite suspicious to Aster, so he inquires about the reason. The headmaster answers that he wants to talk about the favor which Aster traded for the library pass earlier. Taking out a letter, the headmaster asks Aster to deliver it to his friend. Aster can sense quite a bit of suspiciousness in it, so he questions where he has to go to deliver it. The headmaster answers that, though his friend is hiding, after asking around from the old comrades, he finds out that he is hiding in the Hamron Great Forest. Actually, this forest has been preserved during ancient times, along with many kinds of monsters and magical materials too. Aster cannot believe that he wants him to go there. The headmaster thinks that our boy can find him easily since people live there. As Aster is about to deny it, the headmaster adds something and takes out another page for him on which plenty of elixirs are written, which he is granting to Aster. Later on, the headmaster asks him to continue his sentence, so our hero continues. But instead of rejecting, he states that he is going to retire from the academy. This means Aster has accepted his proposal since it was quite high to reject. Reviewing the agreement with the headmaster, Aster appears quite excited. He has received 3 top-grade elixirs thus far, leading him to believe his current life is going well. Adding to this enthusiasm, he also holds vouchers for the Irricane workshop, a prestigious establishment favored by noble families. He wonders if this is a dream or reality. The headmaster is plotting to send him on a mission, which explains the influx of gifts. Specifically, the headmaster requires help from a certain individual who is currently occupied with a personal task. He wants our hero to travel there and assist the man. Upon realizing this is a setup, Aster demands more compensation, even pushing negotiations to a dangerous brink. As he considers his progress, he originally planned to increase his mana capacity, but with 3 elixirs in his possession, he decides to attempt a technique called mana limbs. This method references the reinforced bodies of knights achieved through ether. Our boy believes he can finally shed his weak physique and become a mage with the constitution of a knight. He is eager to surpass the strength he held in his previous life. Some time passes. Aster sits at his regular spot, ready to meditate. He consumes an elixir from a nearby box and begins the process, carefully directing the mana into every part of his body. Suddenly, the firebrand inside him activates. This makes him anxious, causing him to lose focus, but he soon regains control. Deep down, he wonders what the outcome will be this time. After circulating the mana throughout his body, he begins inserting it into his muscle fibers. He groans as extreme pain flares through him. The sensation is so intense that he fears his body is tearing apart, making him question if the effort is worth the agony. Just as he considers stopping, the firebrand forces the cultivation to continue even harder. He yells at the brand, fearing his body isn't ready for such intensity. The process eventually finishes. Aster stands up, drenched in perspiration. He examines his hand, wondering if the technique worked, and notes that he must train properly to reach his full potential. To test himself, he bites his thumb, expecting the wound to heal in 15 minutes. To his shock, it heals instantly. He realizes he is already stronger than he was in his previous life. With the secret tome of healing light from Henzi, he believes he can reach the same level as Damien. Aster senses mana emanating from his blood on the floor, noting its similarity to his own. He hypothesizes that he can control it and tests this theory with a light emission spell. As he casts it, he realizes that while he provides the spark, the true power originates from the blood. By increasing his blood volume and utilizing a collision formula, he will become even more powerful. Aster decides to utilize the Blandor family's healing art, the proliferation formula, due to its effectiveness in regeneration. He considers discussing this with Henzi, but because he wishes to avoid the man, he decides to wait until Lancy arrives for the parent consultation. Despite the complications, our protagonist is thrilled with this new power, which he names blood magic. The scene shifts to a woman named Lancy sitting before Aster, Damien, and Chenbi. She inquires about their health before explaining her visit. Lady Gamo sent her to discuss the Blandor inner lake construction and the statue architecture proposal they suggested earlier. Lancy remarks that the proposal was impressive, wondering if they had outside help. As she sips her tea, Damien and Chenbi wait excitedly for Lady Gamo's decision. Lancy announces that the proposal was denied. However, she offers a condition. If they want the project to proceed, Damien must place in the top 16 during midterm evaluations. She also offers Aster and Chenbi a reward from the Blandor family if they help Damien prepare. Although our hero knows that tutoring Damien will be difficult, he agrees to the task, as he remains determined to obtain the proliferation formula. Aster begins teaching Damien as per the agreement with Lancy. When our protagonist questions him about his familiarity with the basics of magic, Damien simply stands there with a blank expression, clearly knowing nothing. Aster then asks to see his notes. In response, Damien drops a heavy pile of books in front of them. Beside them, Chenbi looks at the books in complete disbelief. Chenbi asks if Damien at least turned his assignments into the teachers on time. When Damien confirms he did, Chenbi breathes a sigh of relief, though Aster remains suspicious. Reviewing the notes, our boy realizes that while Damien is hopeless with magic, he actually excels in culture and history. This means they must focus entirely on his magic classes. While the material is manageable, our hero feels a lack of confidence in his ability to get through the lessons without hitting his student. During their session, Furion approaches and asks if Aster is truly going to teach Damien. He offers his assistance, though our boy struggles to see how he could be of use. Noticing their skepticism, Furion produces a paper covered in formulas that Chenbi recognizes immediately. With a slight smile, Furion explains that it is a compilation of recent academy exams, including summarized questions from all their professors. As Chenbi reviews the papers, Furion asks if they are ready to trust him. Although our protagonist is reluctant to accept him, he realizes he has no other option. As soon as he agrees, Furion reveals his condition. He wants help with combat after the midterm exams, believing Aster's fighting skills will be a great asset. Within a split second, our hero suggests heading to the training room to help him immediately. Furion yells after him, explaining that someone else actually needs the help, and asks the boy to follow him instead. After walking for some time, they reach the city of Haze. Aster asks how much further they have to go, and while Furion claims they are almost there, our protagonist is already exhausted. Walking behind him, Aster feels a growing urge to hit him until Furion finally stops at their destination. The building appears to be a private training center, leading Aster to realize that the person they are meeting must be quite wealthy. Dahlia Dedini welcomes them. Furion speaks with her, suggesting she reconsider seeking help from Aster, but Dahlia remains persistent. After a moment of thought, our hero offers a different proposal. Dahlia should train with Furion instead. He explains that he must focus on teaching Damien until the exams are over. A shocked Furion tells Dahlia not to listen to him, yelling at our protagonist that he just provided them with vital study materials. Aster counters that the materials were payment for a previous debt, and Furion still hasn't made amends for what he did to Chenbi. Dahlia agrees with our boy, further shocking Furion. He begins to protest, claiming that as a descendant of the Denai family, he won't accept such an arrangement. With a smirk, Aster watches him, thinking he has found the perfect punching bag. Eventually, Furion stops arguing and leaves to study for the midterms. Aster assures Dahlia that he will fulfill his duty now that payment is settled. He asks if she wants person-to-person combat training, and she simply nods. The scene shifts to a dining table where Evelyn has lunch with a man named DB. They discuss the recent trial corridor, noting that no one succeeded in obtaining the bracelet. With a smile, Evelyn mentions that preparations for the upcoming exams will be finished within the week. DB immediately assumes she wants him to steal the exam papers, but Evelyn claims she only wants his general help. Instead of agreeing, the man hands her a page with an address, telling her the person there will assist her. After receiving it, she politely invites him to finish his meal. Walking behind Dahlia, Aster reflects on his previous life. The two shared a deep, bitter history, fueled by a mutual animosity so intense that he is certain that he would have killed her numerous times had she not been constantly protected. However, he also recognizes the strategic value in teaching her. In his past life, she somehow managed to seize control over Declan, and he is eager to use their training sessions as a means of seeking a bit of personal revenge through combat. Standing face to face, our protagonist asks her about the basis of their duel. Dahlia, curious and focused, explains that she wants to learn the specific movements he utilized during his fight with Exter. Our hero dismisses this, explaining that one cannot learn simply by mimicking. She must develop a method suited to her own strengths. He poses a question. Who would win a duel between an official rank 8 and a rank 9 mage? When Dahlia guesses the rank 8 would prevail, he corrects her, stating that victory simply goes to whoever succeeds in cracking the other's head first. Dahlia appears confused, but before she can process the thought, Aster attacks her, remarking that the first strike wins the fight. He continues to instruct her using various methods, effectively beating her until dawn before departing for home. Looking at the sky, he muses that if he continues to thrash her in this manner, she will likely learn everything she needs quite soon. While heading back, Aster thinks of Damien until a familiar face in the crowd catches his eye. A creepy smile spreads across his face as he spots DB, the man Evelyn sent to procure the exam papers. Though DB wishes to quit working for her, he feels trapped by the allure of her noble connections. Despite his previous failure caused by Aster, he remains determined to succeed this time. Our hero follows him as he reaches a tea house. DB approaches a worker and, with some hesitation, orders a frozen dragon horn tea, hot. The nonsensical order is clearly a secret code, and the worker's invitation to wait confirms he has come to the right place. The man eventually places a cup of tea before him, noting DB's surprise at the location. He explains that those who seek a dark merchant often expect a hidden lair rather than a common tea house. When the merchant asks for his business, DB reveals he is after the first-year magic department exam papers. The man offers to take DB to meet the seller the following week, providing a specific time and place while warning him not to write the details down. Listening from outside, Aster can hardly believe the coincidence of the buyer and the papers appearing simultaneously. To investigate further, he changes his clothes and dons a mask belonging to Declan to hide his identity. Inside, the merchant is already planning to flee the city of Hayes once the deal is done, fearing the aftermath of the exams. Our protagonist enters, projecting the persona of a Tiger Ruby Jade user, and demands Callahan's subspace pouch. The merchant is shocked, wondering how this stranger knows of an item supposedly lost upon Callahan's death. When the man denies having it, Aster brings up the conversation with the boy who just left. The merchant hesitates, but our hero feigns irritation, claiming the voices in his head are becoming too loud. Terrified by the display of power, the man realizes he is dealing with no ordinary mage and begins to confess everything. Aster suggests they continue the story while walking toward the warehouse, insisting on inspecting it himself to ensure nothing is being hidden. The merchant can only stare back in utter disbelief. Walking towards the warehouse, the merchant remains reluctant to disclose the details of DB's visit. However, our hero, still disguised as a mage of Declan, reassures him by swearing upon Declan's name that no harm will come to him as long as the secret is unrelated to the family. Though still anxious, the man finally confesses that the boy came to him under Evelyn's orders. He admits he doesn't know every detail, but he is certain she is attempting to establish a black market for buying and selling exam papers. Upon hearing her name, Aster immediately recognizes her. She is famous at the academy for being polite, studious, and a model student. He finds it difficult to believe she is orchestrating such a scheme behind her perfect facade. He feels a sense of disgust, noting how unfair this is to students with fewer resources. They soon reach the warehouse, and the man opens the door. While scanning the room, Astor remarks that he doesn't see anything suspicious yet. However, he then abruptly orders the man to prepare 2 subspace pouches, announcing that he intends to confiscate every questionable item in the building. The merchant is left in a state of total shock. Elsewhere, Chenbi attempts to tutor Damien, but their constant disagreements lead to endless arguing. Furion, watching the exchange, is reaching a breaking point of frustration. He recognizes that Damien is a genius, but lacks any shred of common sense. The boy often makes glaring calculation errors, yet somehow arrives at the correct result. At the same time, Furion worries about Dahlia, fearing that Astor might be influencing her mind. Just then, Dahlia appears, covered in bandages, and calls out to him. Seeing her battered state, Furion becomes furious with our hero. Despite the friction, the group studies together for a week. When Chenbi and Furion finally test Damien, they are shocked to find that every one of his answers is correct. Damien erupts with excitement, shouting that he will now be able to produce blood, sweat, and tears. While Furion notes that Damien has only mastered the basic problems, he is still impressed. Simultaneously, his anger toward Astor grows as he waits for him to reappear. Meanwhile, our hero remains in his disguise, keeping a close watch on DB. Astor considered capturing him during the meeting with the seller but decided the timing wasn't right. Though he is ready to expose Evelyn and DB, our protagonist chooses to wait, suspecting that more buyers will soon emerge. DB eventually reaches his destination and enters. He provides the specific details for the papers Evelyn demanded. A man standing behind her meticulously verifies that the official seals and patterns match those of the academy. Evelyn then suggests that she will continue to give DB such missions, even promising to help him secure a position at the Pingrove Trading Company. Excited by the prospect of his family finally respecting him, DB listens as Evelyn instructs him to distribute the papers to their clients before dismissing him. Once he is gone, a creepy smile crosses Evelyn's face as she calls him an idiot. She stands and questions a cloaked figure about their preparations. The man explains that soon, everything she has done will be pinned on DB and the Pingrove Trading Company. Evelyn is using the boy as a scapegoat. Watching through the window, our boy is stunned by the depth of her malice. His priority shifts to teaching Evelyn a lesson she won't forget. Although our hero has recorded the entire exchange in a crystal orb, he decides to wait for the perfect moment to strike. After pondering his next move, he devises a plan to steer her back toward a more honorable path. He begins writing on a sheet of paper, concluding his message by pressing a stamp into the corner. On the other hand, Dahlia continues to practice the lesson Astor taught her regarding the first strike. She focuses on magic that activates instantly and can be cast unconsciously, understanding now that even a genius will fall once their head is smashed. The scene shifts to the exam hall as students finish their writing. The invigilator calls for pens down and begins collecting the papers. A group gathers around Deminin to discuss their answers, and to their shock, he provides the correct solutions, a feat he has never achieved before. As they wonder if he has been secretly studying, Deminin boasts about his sudden intelligence. In the back of the room, Evelyn watches, knowing the truth. Deminin is the eldest son of Viscount Haramir, whose family controls the kingdom's primary grain warehouses. Because of the leaked exam papers, she anticipates receiving priority security in the bidding for the cereal fields as payment from the Haramir family. Having made 4 such deals already, she waits greedily to see what the remaining 3 clients will offer. Her thoughts are interrupted when a man enters the hall and leads several students away, including DB. Evelyn assumes the authorities have discovered the leak, but her composure breaks when the man summons Deminin as well, stating the director has requested his presence. The following day, all first-year students are summoned to the Grand Hall for an emergency meeting. Rumors of the cheating scandal have already spread, and the room is thick with gossip. Standing among the crowd, Evelyn desperately tries to figure out how a confidential informant could have surfaced. A speaker takes the stage, calling for silence before addressing the assembly. He announces that large-scale cheating occurred during the midterms and reveals that 5 students, including DB, have already been expelled. The speaker then prepares to announce the individual who uncovered the truth. To Evelyn's utter horror, he praises her as the whistleblower. As the crowd erupts into cheers for her supposed integrity, Evelyn tries to insist she is not the one responsible, but her protests are drowned out. While she has avoided expulsion, the situation feels like a trap. Behind her, Astor quietly enjoys the show, knowing this was the only way to force her onto a righteous path. A week passes, and the results are finally posted. Students, including Chenbi and Damien, crowd around the ranking list. Initially, Damien appears in 18th place, causing a wave of disappointment. Astor, however, notices Deminin's name still holding 7th. The official posting the list realizes a clerical error and corrects it. Damien's name moves up to 16th place. Damien and Chenbi celebrate wildly, while our protagonist focuses on the formula he will now claim as his reward. In the midst of the excitement, Chenbi mentions that his experience tutoring Damien has inspired him to apply for an assistant teacher position. Aster immediately discourages this, pointing out that an assistant was implicated in the cheating scandal because the pay is so poor. When our boy asks how long it takes to become an associate professor, Chenbi notes that Professor Perun estimates 3 to 4 years. Seeing Chenbi's persistent desire to teach, our hero advises him to become an archmage instead. Aster explains that once he reaches that level, everyone will fear him, allowing him to teach without hurdles or interference. Deep down, our protagonist truly wants this for him, believing Chenbi is far too talented to settle for a mere assistant role. That night, a purple-eyed man enters a pub and sits across from a figure hidden beneath a cloak. He speaks of ancient ruins recently discovered in the forest of Hamelin. As he shares the news, a creepy smile spreads across his face. Several more days pass, and Aster and Chenbi meet with Lancey to receive their rewards. Our protagonist demands the multiplication formula. Lancey agrees, granting him a high-tier version that exceeds his expectations. Turning her attention to Chenbi, Lancey inquires if he is aware of the ongoing issues within his family. Chenbi admits that while there have been struggles, things are improving daily. Lancey offers to assist his family, and even promises them a new residence, but Chenbi politely declines. He explains that he wishes to remain friends with Damien as equals, without the weight of such a debt. A smile touches Lancey's face at his integrity, while Aster sits between them, feeling momentarily like a third wheel. Chenbi then states that his only wish is to study magic at House Blandor. Lancey is surprised by the simplicity of the request, but Chenbi reassures her it is truly all he wants. Later, a man reports the details of this meeting to Lady Gamo, Damien's mother. Hearing of the exchange, Lady Gamo feels a sense of peace, realizing her son has found genuine friends. Since Chenbi assisted Damien so significantly, she decides to go further than requested, signing an official statement making Chenbi a patron of the house. Upon seeing the agreement, Chenbi is speechless, and the matter concludes harmoniously for everyone. As more time passes, Professor Felina announces the commencement of interpersonal combat preparations. She explains that all other classes will be suspended for a period to allow the academy to focus exclusively on combat. These sessions are not mandatory. Students are free to attend, skip them, or even return to their homes. Amidst the confusion of his classmates, Aster wonders about the motive behind this sudden shift in the curriculum. He is certain the decision came from the higher-ups rather than the teaching staff. That evening, the headmaster sends a letter to Aster via owl with only 8 o'clock written inside. Our protagonist arrives at the meeting destination to find the headmaster has erected a barrier spanning an entire warehouse, an astonishing feat of magic. Stepping inside the perimeter, Aster decides to test his new multiplication formula. He releases a single drop of blood from his finger, which rapidly multiplies into a cloud of hovering droplets. The headmaster appears behind him, noting that the mana within the blood clearly belongs to our boy. He asks if they can be manipulated with magic. When our hero demonstrates his control over the droplets, the headmaster is visibly shocked and demands to know how such a feat is possible. With a smirk, Aster agrees to explain everything, but only after the headmaster grants him a favor. He wants the man to act as a sparring partner so he can battle test his new skill. Aster advises the headmaster to stay alert, but the man dismisses the threat, claiming the boy won't be able to land a scratch on him. In response, our protagonist begins merging the floating red rubies of blood into a single massive sphere. He launches the attack, declaring that explosion is an art. A violent blast follows, blanketing the area in thick smoke. The headmaster eventually emerges from the haze, demanding to know Aster's true identity, as his power far exceeds that of a normal student. Aster calmly maintains that he is just a student, and not some demon possessing a human host. Still suspicious, the headmaster asks again about the nature of the red orbs. Aster responds by holding up his middle finger, indicating the source of the blood. This earns him a sharp punch to the head from the annoyed headmaster. Once they are both seated inside, our protagonist asks why he was summoned. The headmaster explains that he needs to discuss the Great Forest, but first, he produces a magical orb for Aster to examine. Our hero can only stare at the object in complete shock. The Great Forest of Hamern is a dense wilderness teeming with monsters and hardy humans who have somehow managed to endure its conditions. Only elite mercenaries are capable of surviving within its borders, yet even these veterans are growing fearful. Aster finds this reaction natural, given that the enemy consists of undead creatures. However, the headmaster clarifies that these are no ordinary undead. They are self-born, moving by the power of the soul itself. This leads our protagonist to wonder if these entities were sealed away alongside the ancient ruins. The headmaster explains that the threat is actually the destroyer, the most impure being in existence. It appears the seal has shattered, allowing spirits to roam freely. He notes that they must reach the forest within 2 days, but since none of his disciples are currently available, he turns to our hero. He makes it clear that even if Aster refuses the mission, he will not take back the rewards previously given. Our boy questions if there is an additional prize for completing this task, but the headmaster admits there is nothing else to offer. As the headmaster begins a plea regarding the lives at stake, Aster interrupts to accept the mission. This sudden compliance shocks the headmaster, but our hero explains that he wouldn't bargain over the life of the headmaster's friend. In truth, our boy intended to go regardless, as he seeks a specific type of knowledge only available within that forest. To facilitate the journey, the headmaster provides a teleportation ticket and an artifact cloak, the latter of which Aster feels is almost too valuable to be given away so casually. Finally, he hands over the Sockwall mark, warning our protagonist to remain vigilant. The headmaster explains that a man named Hell is hiding his identity within the forest, and this mark will allow him to recognize Aster as an ally. To handle House Blandor, our boy sends a letter to Chenbi stating he is leaving for training and should not be searched for. The scene shifts to Greentown, a settlement near the Great Forest. Locals prepare to enter the woods, planning to exit before nightfall. Inside a local pub, a mage named Oberon sits alone, fretting over the sudden surge of monsters and wondering if his request for aid will be answered. His subordinate, Rayleigh, approaches him in tears, swearing he will never return to the forest. Oberon insists they have no choice, as they are bound by contract and have already been paid. While Oberon worries, a subtle, treacherous smile plays on Rayleigh's face. He has no intention of returning with a weak mage like Oberon. He plans to either find a more powerful partner or simply abandon his mentor and flee. At that moment, Aster appears, prominently wearing the Sockwall mark. Taking a seat, he asks Oberon if Leheim is his mentor. When Oberon confirms this, our hero realizes he has found the right contact and instructs the mage to address him as Senior. Rayleigh shoves a map toward Oberon, reiterating his refusal to go. Oberon accepts the map, feeling braver now that he has a companion. However, our hero orders Rayleigh to stop. He challenges the man to sit back down within a single second or face the consequences. Rayleigh fails to react in time, and as the second expires, Aster stands and begins beating him mercilessly. As Oberon watches the display in total shock, a single question crosses his mind. Can this newcomer truly destroy the destroyer? Inside the Great Forest, the purple-eyed Solian works meticulously on the ground as Mole emerges from the shadows. When Mole inquires about the progress, Solian invites him to see for himself. Peering into a nearby cave, Mole realizes the seal has not yet fully shattered. Solian explains that despite his continuous casting of the unsealing spell, the process is agonizingly slow, which Mole finds deeply annoying. Mole notes the oddity of the situation, as he can clearly feel a heavy aura of death clinging to the air. The conversation turns to an ancient war mage whom Mole believes is currently hunting for Deathros. Solian wonders if Mole can handle such an adversary alone, since Solian must remain behind to maintain the unsealing ritual. Mole brags about his prowess, claiming his subspace is already filled with the heads of war mages, making this newcomer just another trophy. Meanwhile, our protagonist treks through the woods alongside Oberon, with a heavily bandaged Rayleigh leading the way. Oberon reflects that while the local monsters are lethal, they surely cannot defy the power of their own blood. He marvels at how his luck has turned. Only minutes ago he was despairing, but now he feels a sense of security. Looking at Aster, Oberon assumes they are roughly the same age due to their similar height and silently praises him. Our boy has solved every problem with ease, even earning the nickname New Moon in record time. Aster offers to place the heavy bag Rayleigh is hauling into his subspace, but Rayleigh refuses, insisting it contains essential items for an emergency. Since the bag also holds Oberon's belongings, our hero suspects Rayleigh is still plotting a robbery. Their internal musings are cut short by a sudden rush of noise. Rayleigh warns the group to stay alert as enemies close in from behind. Hamern orcs mounted on wolf-like beasts. Rayleigh is shocked to see the orcs so far from the second base. As Oberon grows anxious, red orbs suddenly materialize in the air. Our hero's blood, multiplied through his secret formula. Addressing Oberon as Junior, Aster orders him to erect a shield. He then launches an attack, triggering a massive explosion. When the smoke clears, the orcs have vanished, and the landscape is charred. Terrified by this display of power, Rayleigh immediately backtracks and begs Aster to take the bag into his subspace. As they continue, they encounter 7-foot-tall goblins, a sight that strikes Aster as highly unusual. He wonders if Deathros is the cause of this mutation. Rayleigh identifies them as Kenti goblins, typically found only near the second base camp. Their presence here suggests they are either expanding their territory or fleeing a greater threat. Upon closer inspection, Rayleigh points out that their fingernails are caked with dust and bark, and their feet are heavily damaged, confirming they are in a desperate retreat. Rayleigh suggests taking a detour to avoid further hordes. Though our hero is confident in his strength, he agrees to the change in route. Rayleigh successfully navigates them onto a safer path, which impresses Aster. Even with his own vast knowledge, he wouldn't have found this trail. For the first time, our boy begins to trust him. By nightfall, Rayleigh announces they are near the base, with only a swamp left to cross. He suggests that Aster and Oberon rest by a fire while he scouts ahead. As they sit, Oberon's anxiety peaks. He laments that they must find Deathros immediately, or the monsters will overrun them, even going so far as to claim the entire catastrophe is his fault. Aster listens, wondering why Oberon is choosing to confide these heavy burdens to him. Their conversation is shattered by a loud crash as Rayleigh comes sprinting back, screaming for them to run. The ruler of the swamp is upon them. The depths is a localized hell within the great forest, and the ruler of the swamp is one of the most lethal creatures hailing from that territory. As the three sit around the fire, Rayleigh explains that no one truly knows why the beast moved into the forest. It remained hidden for centuries, but its recent appearance in the wetlands is a stroke of terrible luck. Aster asks if they can simply bypass the area, given the forest's vastness. Rayleigh clarifies that avoidance is impossible, as the creature will catch their scent the moment they touch the water. Oberon suggests a different route, but Rayleigh notes that a detour would cost them 10 days, perhaps even a month, and might force them all the way back to the third base camp. Our hero stands up, prompting Rayleigh to ask if he wants a new path cleared. To their shock, Aster announces they are taking the wetlands route regardless. Rayleigh desperately tries to explain that the creature is a legend that has slaughtered countless mages and knights. Our boy simply counters that they won't just be walking through the swamp, they are going to kill the beast. While Rayleigh initially feels a flicker of peace, the gravity of the second sentence hits him, and he realizes how dire their situation has become. Oberon insists that Aster shouldn't throw his life away. In response, our protagonist tells him to be quiet and find his resolve, warning that if he stays paralyzed by fear now, he'll never survive an encounter with Deathros. As he walks away, he declares the decision final. The ruler of the swamp dies tomorrow. Reflecting on these words, Oberon eventually stands and vows to assist. He reveals a hidden, unawakened talent called Overclock, which pushes a target's potential to its absolute limit for a short duration. Aster stops and orders him to explain the technique in full. The next morning, our boy finds Oberon meditating alone. When Oberon asks what he's doing, the protagonist reveals Rayleigh, whom he is dragging by the collar. Rayleigh was attempting to flee, so our hero tells him to pick out a favorite tree. The next time he tries to run, Aster will tie him to it and leave him as a snack for the wyverns. Rayleigh begins begging and crying, swearing he won't desert them again. After breakfast, Aster is fully prepared for the hunt. He asks if the others are ready. Oberon agrees, though Rayleigh remains a trembling mess. Our boy strides into the wetlands, knowing the creature is sensitive to any intrusion. He draws his dagger and cuts his finger. The moment the blood hits the water, the swamp begins to churn. As Oberon and Rayleigh watch in terror, our protagonist challenges his enemy to show itself and face its end. The creature erupts from the depths and Aster glances at Oberon, the signal to begin. Oberon casts the full release spell on our hero, propelling his power to its peak. With a surge of energy, Aster leaps into the air, closing the distance to deliver the first strike against the ruler of the swamp. The night before, Oberon had disclosed the full details of his gift to Aster. He warned that the target can only sustain such a full release of strength for 5 minutes. Any longer would prove fatal. In the present, as our protagonist lunges toward the monster, he determines that 5 minutes is more than enough to secure a victory. He initiates a Stage 2 ignition attack, engulfing the creature in a relentless blaze. Rayleigh watches in confusion, unable to comprehend what kind of spell allows fire to continue burning even upon the surface of the water. The monster appears to weaken within the inferno, leading the group to believe the end is near. However, the beast lets out a sudden, ear-piercing roar that causes the flames to vanish instantly. Aster realizes the roar was a manual disruption of the mana flow, but as the smoke clears, he unintentionally locks eyes with the creature. Standing at a distance, Rayleigh screams for our boy to look away, warning that the enemy's gaze can freeze a person's mana. Aster yells back, cursing him for providing such vital information so late. Rayleigh is momentarily transported to his childhood, remembering his father's warnings about the ruler of the swamp. His father had described the creature's ability to paralyze mana through eye contact and its power to repel even the strikes of a knight. Until this moment, Rayleigh's fear had him on the verge of desertion, questioning why he should risk his life for these mages. Yet looking at Aster, he realizes our hero is different from anyone he has ever met. Choosing to finally place his trust in the boy, he overcomes his cowardice, even if his warning came late. Now ready to fight alongside his companions, Rayleigh watches as Aster adjusts his strategy. Since he cannot look the monster in the eye, our protagonist makes another cut on his hand and splashes his blood directly at the creature's face. The droplets strike the monster's eyes, causing sharp pain and blurring its vision. Seizing the opening, Aster executes a collision attack that leaves the beast heavily injured. With the monster unable to focus its gaze, our hero prepares his final move, Explosive Annihilation. The attack hits with devastating force, successfully defeating the enemy while Oberon and Rayleigh look on in a state of shock. As the smoke clears from the sky, our boy lies in the shallow water, completely exhausted. He reflects on his past fight with Pahern, remembering that he had intended to use this very attack then, but was too tired to execute it. He wonders how Payhern would have reacted. While he is certain the man would have found a way to block it, he doubts his opponent would have walked away smiling. Beside him, the ruler of the swamp lies dead, its body sliced in half. Oberon and Rayleigh rush toward him in a state of excitement. However, the scene shifts to a crow perched on a nearby tree. Looking closely at its eyes, it becomes clear that someone is using the bird to keep a watchful sight on our hero. The watcher in the trees is none other than Mole, who has been following Aster and even orchestrated the encounter with the swamp creature. Observing the battle, Mole doubts our boy is a simple mage, given the staggering volume of mana he wields. More impressively, Mole felt a rare flicker of fear while watching the struggle. He feels a sudden, intense urge to hunt our hero, yet the sensation is unfamiliar. It is not the typical excitement of a predator finding prey, but rather the mutual respect a hunter feels for a peer. Now, he is eager to test who is stronger, though he knows he must prepare himself before making his move. The scene shifts to the campfire where Aster finally wakes. He asks how long he has been out, and Oberon informs him it has only been 2 hours. Our protagonist still feels nauseous, which Oberon explains is a side effect of the overclock technique. Since the duration was short, the condition isn't fatal, but he will remain weakened for at least a day. Looking at his trembling hands, our boy feels like death, realizing he would have likely drowned in the wetlands if his companions hadn't pulled him out. Aster soon calls for Rayleigh, who appears instantly to reassure him that he has no intention of running away. When asked where he was, Rayleigh explains he was scavenging the Lord of the Swamp's remains for valuables. He asks our hero what should be done with the corpse. Aster tells him he can keep it and even hands over Callahan's subspace pouch, which he acquired from the black market. Oberon is hesitant, noting that the monster's parts are incredibly expensive, but our boy insists that Rayleigh deserves the reward. Oberon begins praising his character, touched by such a lack of materialism. In reality, Aster knows that while these parts are famous, they often lose their magical value the moment the creature dies. As Rayleigh begins cutting through the flesh with suspicious ease, our hero's theory is confirmed. The corpse is already worthless. Oberon questions their next move, noting they are behind schedule, and that Rayleigh suggested resting for another day. Aster, however, refuses to wait and insists they keep moving. By nightfall, they reach the base camp, which is shrouded in total darkness. Rayleigh explains that they avoid fires to prevent attracting monsters. He suggests they find the keeper to secure quarters, noting that the camp is run by a mercenary group who act as local lords, essentially glorified bandits. The mention of bandits makes Rayleigh anxious, but his nerves worsen when someone calls his name from the shadows. Rayleigh recognizes the man and addresses him as Chief. Oberon identifies the newcomer as the camp's fixer and the leader of the base. Before Oberon can finish introducing the group, the man jumps forward, announcing their name is Aviot. The chief extends a hand to Aster, who responds by grasping it with a crushing grip. The chief mocks the gesture as childish behavior, even as Oberon winces at the sound of something breaking. The leader explains he is there because he heard rumors they are heading toward Base Camp 4. He glares at Rayleigh, mentioning he heard this from someone who bragged about scamming a mage. The chief then proposes that his group accompany them, warning that Base Camp 4 is on the verge of falling if no action is taken. Aster considers the offer, but before he can agree, Oberon flatly denies the request, leaving our hero confused. Oberon explains that the situation at the 4th base is far worse than anyone could imagine. The camp has essentially become a land of death. The chief questions if Oberon believes they should avoid the area, because it is a suicide mission. When Oberon agrees, the chief flares with anger, claiming he has survived this forest solely through his sword, and will not be told what to do. He insults Oberon, stating he expected much more from a disciple of Reheim. As the chief storms off, Oberon is left standing in a cloud of shame while Aster and Rayleigh move to enter the base. After taking a shower, Aster feels refreshed, and after checking on his companions, seeks out the chief to talk. As he takes a seat, the chief dismisses him as a kid. In response, our hero asks the man's age. The chief reveals he turns 50 next year, to which Aster dryly remarks that he himself was 50 last year. Moving past the banter, he offers to let the chief join their party, advising him not to take Oberon's hesitation seriously. Aster was genuinely impressed by the ether he sensed from the man earlier. However, the chief remains suspicious, wondering if the boy intends to use his men as bait. Our hero admits that while that wasn't his initial thought, he isn't above using them if a need arises. The chief explains that this mission is actually an escape route. He is sending the younger mercenaries out of the Great Forest, while the veterans head toward the 4th base camp. Aster muses that it's a heavy burden to put oneself in such danger for the sake of others, but the chief remains resolute. The chief then demands that Rayleigh stay behind to guide the younger recruits out of the forest, offering our protagonist a different guide in exchange. When Aster asks why a guide is necessary for a standard exit, the chief points to the threat of the Lord of the Swamp in the wetlands. Our hero tells him not to worry about the beast, casually explaining that he has already sent the monster to the afterlife. The next day, the mercenaries begin dismantling the camp and gathering supplies. Aster approaches the chief to ask if he is ready to depart. The chief explains his delay was only to ensure the safety of the younger generation. They strike a deal. Our protagonist will lead the chief to Base Camp 4, after which they will go their separate ways. As the chief begins to speak with newfound respect, Aster suggests he drop the formalities, joking that he is only 2 years older than the man. As he walks away, the chief looks annoyed, certain our hero is younger than him, yet he cannot ignore the fact that the boy killed a Lord-class monster. With the younger mercenaries safely on their way, the chief orders the remaining veterans to assemble, unable to delay their march any longer.